A simple question. If a man is humiliated right in the seat he paid for, would he rise in anger or stay silent, letting the world expose itself? Dozens of eyes turned toward him. He said nothing, didn't move, just smiled. A smile that seemed fragile. But 15 minutes later, it would make an entire airline stop. Sometimes, justice doesn't need to shout. It only needs one person calm enough to stay seated. And that's how it all began. Ethan Brooks placed boarding pass 3A on the wooden table, the cabin's blue light reflecting through the glass. "I'm just flying like any other passenger." Ryan Carter, the head flight attendant, looked at him, voice cold. "Apologies, sir. Policy has changed. This seat is no longer available." Ethan looked up. "For what reason?" Ryan pressed his lips. "We'll move you to another section. Please cooperate to avoid complications." The cabin went silent. People stared at the ticket in his hand, at the steady, almost unreal calm in his smile. Ethan nodded slightly, the blue reflection flickering in his eyes. 15 minutes. He spoke softly, almost to himself. Just 15 minutes for some seats to show how a whole system treats people. Ryan frowned. "What did you say?" Ethan smiled. "Nothing. Only that I'll sit where I paid to sit." The cabin held its breath. Every passenger watched. No one knew who this man was. No one knew that from this very moment. A quiet revolution of dignity and fairness was taking flight. A deep voice echoed steady and clear. 15 minutes, just 15 minutes, for some people to reveal who they truly are. And so, the story of seat 3A began. 15 minutes, just 15 minutes, enough for a number to expose an entire system. A boarding pass lay still on the cold table. Seat 3A, a number that seemed ordinary, but no one knew it was about to rewrite an airline's history. The man placed his hand on the ticket. No trembling, no rush, only the calm of someone who's seen injustice too many times dressed as politeness. A voice came from behind. "Sir, please move to the rear section. This is a policy update." He looked up. The blue cabin light shimmered in his eyes like a storm waiting to rise. He smiled, a smile that made the attendant falter for a second. "What kind of policy is written in someone's silence?" The attendant hesitated. Her polite smile thinned. The kind trained to keep order, not to listen. She managed to whisper, "Please cooperate, sir. We don't want any delay." Delay for whom? The question left his lips softly. Yet the air turned heavy. A middle-aged man in front raised an eyebrow. A woman pretended to look at her phone. The sound of shoes, seatbelts clicking, a faint cough, all merged into a silence with a shape of its own. Ethan stayed still. No wasted movement, no resistance, no surrender. He spoke just loud enough for one person to hear, but the whole cabin caught it. "If I leave, what will this seat teach you?" Ryan, the head flight attendant, stepped closer, his voice even polite and cold. "Sir, we're only following regulations. Please understand." Ethan looked at him. Not angry, not superior, just a quiet gaze. Enough to make Ryan look away. A few phones were lifted discreetly. The glow of screens flickered like eyes watching a social experiment unfold. "Would you like to file a complaint?" Ryan asked, trying to steady his tone. Ethan replied, "I don't complain. I observe." A long silence fell. Everyone on board knew this was no longer about a seat. A small voice whispered from the back row. "Why doesn't he just stand up and move?" Her husband answered softly, "Maybe he knows something we don't." Ethan tilted his head slightly as if he'd heard it. A faint smile touched his lips, the smile of a man who chose to stand in the storm, without moving a step. No one knew who he was, only that he refused to leave seat 3A, only that in a few minutes, the entire airline would shake. A single smile, enough to test an entire system. A simple act, enough to make the world look at itself again. And when the blue light caught the silver watch on his wrist, engraved with the words, "For those who endure," no one yet realized they were witnessing the beginning of a tremor called "Justice has its own seat." The counter was quiet. As if all sound had been drained away, only the soft roll of a suitcase broke the air. An agent glanced at him, then smiled at the person behind, their bag flashing a large logo. Ethan waited, ticket folded neatly in hand. Plain black. No markings. "Let me check in first, please." A woman's voice rose, and the agent nodded without question. Ethan stepped half a pace back, offering space, eyes calm as still water. Another agent approached, gaze sliding over his shoes, his watch, the unbranded backpack. "You sure this is first class?" The question hit like a cold stone. Ethan nodded, placing his ticket on the counter. Silence so deep the clerk could hear her own heartbeat. "Yes, the seat I paid for." He spoke slowly, as if he wanted her to hear the silence between each word. "Do you have a membership card?" "Yes, but I'd rather not show it today." "May I ask why?" "Because respect shouldn't need a card." The clerk froze for a moment, then gave a polite, practiced smile. "Please wait over there. We'll call you." Two businessmen arrived, silver suitcases gleaming, the air rich with expensive cologne. "Welcome back, sir. Your scotch will be ready after takeoff." Ethan listened, the way one listens to a song played too many times. He stepped half a pace closer. "May I ask, is there anything else to verify?" The agent looked up, eyes measuring politely. "No, just wait," a man behind whispered. "He doesn't look first class." His companion chuckled softly. "Maybe he's at the wrong gate." Ethan turned, smiled faintly, a smile neither defensive nor provoking, just a mirror held up to judgment. A young woman with headphones standing beside him pulled one side down. "You okay?" "I'm fine." That question sounded rude. Rude, but familiar. She nodded, glancing at his ticket. 3A. Nice spot. A seat is just a seat. What matters is how people see it. The announcement called for priority boarding. The line curved like a stretched wire. Ethan stayed still, waiting for his group. No pushing, no explanation. A flight attendant passed by with a tray of lemon water, paused to the right of him, then turned toward a man in a suit. "Would you like a drink?" "Sir." Laughter answered, and the tray glided past Ethan as if he didn't exist. The young woman tilted her head. "They skipped you. Maybe they're busy. Or maybe they're busy seeing wrong. Sometimes seeing wrong is a habit that gets paid." Another agent called out warmly, "Mr. Peterson, good to see you again. I'll take care of your luggage." Ethan watched the man's suitcase being lifted gently, while other hands had to lift their own burdens. A few minutes later, Ethan stepped to the counter again. "I'm afraid I might have missed my turn." "No, sir. We'll invite you when appropriate." The word appropriate, does it mean when someone fits your idea of belonging? The clerk hesitated, then retreated behind a thin smile. A little boy tugged his mother's hand. "Mom, why do they keep skipping that man?" She patted his head softly. "We don't know what's going on inside." Ethan bent down, smiling at the boy. "Thank you for noticing." The priority line was nearly empty. The young woman had gone ahead. She turned and gave him a thumbs up, a small promise in motion. Ethan felt his heartbeat slow, each pulse marking an invisible test. Then the agent called again, this time his name. "Mr. Brooks, you may proceed." Ethan placed his ticket down once more. "Do I look more first class now?" The clerk smiled awkwardly. "Sorry for the wait." Waiting is the easy part. The gate opened. A soft breeze brushed through the narrow walkway. At the cabin door, a flight attendant greeted passengers with a professional smile, deeper for those with the right logos, thinner when her eyes met Ethan's black backpack. "Your seat, sir. 3A. Left side." He walked slowly, hearing the low murmur of cushions, the scent of new leather and morning coffee. A tall man stood in the aisle, glancing at Ethan's ticket, then at his face. "You sure? That's your seat?" "I'm sure. Usually, 3A is mine. Then maybe today is different." The man scoffed, leaving a trace of entitlement hanging in the air. Ethan sat down in 3A, hand resting on the armrest, cool as a quiet warning. He neither lowered his head nor lifted it high. He simply placed himself where he belonged, like a stone settling into the riverbed. The chief attendant passed by, eyes scanning like a barcode reader. Stopped at him 1 second, then moved on. No welcome drink, no hot towel, just a space wide enough for others to walk by. Without seeing him, he exhaled slowly, evenly, and an old question rose in his mind. When politeness blocks its ears, who still hears what matters? You sure this is first class? The earlier question still lingered in the air. Ethan whispered, just for himself. I'm sure, and I'm sure respect isn't a seat class. A figure stopped by the aisle. Ryan Carter, uniform crisp, eyes sharp. Sir, there'll be a few small adjustments due to updated policy. Ethan met his gaze. Adjustments or tests? Ryan kept his polite smile. We'd appreciate your cooperation. Ethan tilted his head slightly. I always cooperate. With fairness. A ripple of silence spread from seat 3A through the rows. Phones lifted just low enough to avoid notice, high enough to record a moment no one dared to name. Ethan touched the edge of his ticket. His smile returned. Thin, steady, like a thread tying shut the door of a storm. In a few minutes, this ordinary seat would pull the brakes on a giant machine. But for now, there was only one man sitting still, choosing to stay and letting silence speak first. Ryan Carter walked forward, each step precise, mechanical, rehearsed. The smile on his face was flawless to the point of being emotionless, just polished enough to hide the judgment already formed behind his eyes. Good morning, sir. The words came out smooth, cold as freshly sharpened metal. Ethan looked up. The light on Ryan's forehead reflected in a white streak. Brighter than necessary, he answered softly. Morning. Nothing more. Nothing less. Ryan leaned closer, eyes scanning each detail like a barcode. The gold watch on Logan Pierce's wrist, the passenger in front, made him smile genuinely. Then his gaze dropped to Ethan's wrist. A simple black leather band. The smile vanished like a power cut from a circuit. Would you like help with your luggage, sir? I can manage. Of course. Ryan's tone lowered, the kind reserved for passengers who didn't belong in this world. He straightened his tie, lifted his chin at the perfect 15-degree angle of a head attendant. Every movement is precise enough to feel unnatural. Even the word sir stretched just long enough to measure tolerance. Ethan stayed silent, sliding his bag neatly under the seat. No reaction, just observation. Sometimes, to see a person's truth, you don't watch what they do. You watch who they think you are. Ryan turned to Logan. Mr. Pierce, a pleasure to serve you again. His voice changed completely. Warm, full, confident. Thank you, Ryan. You still remember my scotch, right? Of course, sir. After takeoff, I'll bring your usual Glenfiddich 18. Ethan listened, each word tapping softly against the glass in his mind. Not bitter, just cold. Ryan looked back at him, eyes flicking unconsciously between the two men. Same cabin, different worlds. One served before he even spoke. The other, still proving he belonged to the seat he'd paid for. Would you like something before takeoff, sir? I'm fine. Are you sure, sir? Sure. Ryan smiled, but it carried no trust. Very well. I'll check on you later. He turned away, steps timed by an invisible metronome. Though his eyes lingered, a trace of doubt. Not enough to be an insult, but enough to sting. Ethan looked down at his hands, the worn leather strap, the silver watch face reflecting empty rows ahead. He murmured, not to anyone. A smile can be so precise, it forgets the heart behind it. The woman beside him turned slightly. What did you say? Nothing. Just noting how people greet each other. Ryan passed again, the same perfect smile in place. But now his eyes carried a chill, as if afraid this passenger knew too much. Logan Pierce laughed loudly. Ryan, remind our friend there that this is business class, will you? A few passengers chuckled softly. The laughter of quiet alliance. Ryan replied flawlessly. Of course, Mr. Pierce. We always make sure everyone's in the right place. Ethan raised his head slightly. Thank you for the reminder. I like where I am. No anger, no need to raise his voice, just a calm so sharp it cut the air. Ryan paused for half a second, then masked discomfort with a thin smile. "We just want the flight to run smoothly, sir." "So do I." In that instant, the cabin fell still. The reflection on the window blurred the line between politeness and prejudice. A young passenger whispered from the back, "Is anyone recording this?" Already rolling. Phones began to glow, tiny sparks of an oncoming storm. Ryan felt it, yet kept smiling, a smile perfect by training. But behind that polished glass, he didn't realize he'd just triggered something. Ethan leaned back, eyes closing softly. No rush. Everything would unfold exactly as planned. Because sometimes the only way to wake a system is to sit still and smile back. Leather shoes clicked, firm and confident. A man entered the first-class cabin, phone in hand, shoulders high, smiling the way only the privileged do. Logan Pierce, CEO of Grant Enterprises. The scent of expensive cologne filled the air as whispers faded when he stopped before seat 3A. "That's my seat." His voice carried the tone of someone long accustomed to obedience. Ethan looked up, calm as a lake after rain. Not today. No one laughed. No one met anyone's eyes. The air thickened, as if the cabin had forgotten how to breathe. Ryan Carter stepped in immediately. The perfect smile on his face was already losing color. "Mr. Pierce, allow me to double-check." Logan raised an eyebrow, confidence bordering on arrogance. "No need to check. I always sit here." Ethan studied the man in front of him, not with challenge, but with a strange quietness. "Always is the most dangerous word in every story." Ryan interjected, trying to keep his voice even. "There might be a system error, but according to Platinum Priority regulations." Ethan cut in, soft, steady. "I didn't buy priority. I bought a ticket." A quiet cough came from a few rows behind. A young woman leaned into her husband's hand. No one spoke, but everyone knew. Something had already gone beyond a seat assignment. Logan tilted his head, frustration laced with disdain. "Do you know who I am?" Ethan's tone was velvet over steel. "You're the man who forgot. Seats don't know names." Ryan lowered his voice, trying to calm the tension. "Gentlemen, please, let's be reasonable. We can offer another seat to—" "No need." Ethan's voice cut clean through. "I'm right where I belong." Logan gave a dry laugh. "If you want trouble, I can call the manager." Ethan smiled back, slow, unshaken. "Please do." Silence filled the cabin. The air conditioner hummed. A suitcase rolled softly across the floor like a blade through quiet. Ryan glanced between them, sweat forming despite the cold. "Mr. Pierce, I deeply apologize for this inconvenience. We'll arrange the change immediately." Logan folded his arms, settling into an empty seat nearby, voice dripping with confidence. "Good. Let's not let a small issue damage the airline's image." Ethan looked up. "A small issue? You're sure about that?" All eyes turned. His voice stayed low, steady, yet something in it made the cabin tremble. Some small issues, if left untouched, become the history of silence. Ryan inhaled, struggling to maintain his manners. "Sir, I assure you this is just a system fault." Ethan nodded lightly. "I know, but systems don't invent faults. They learn them from people." Logan chuckled, arrogance resurfacing. "Are you preaching now? I came here to fly, not to attend a lecture." Ethan tilted his head slightly, gaze unwavering. "You're right, but sometimes a flight must pause to fix the runway." A few soft wows rippled through the cabin, disbelief mixing with awe. Logan's face flushed red, his hand gripping the armrest. "Who do you think you are?" Ethan met his eyes. "A passenger, but today, I want to see if respect has its own seat." Ryan's hands tightened, his glance flicking toward the cockpit. "Gentlemen, if this continues, we'll have to delay departure." Ethan nodded calmly, gaze still fixed on Logan. "Maybe we should, because if a plane takes off with silent injustice aboard, it may never land in the right place." No one spoke. The entire cabin held its breath, Light from the window blurred the line between authority and dignity. Two faces reflected in the glass, one used to giving orders, the other used to listening to what silence reveals. This time, the world waited to see. Which of them would learn first? Logan turned away, muttering under his breath, "You'll regret wasting my time." Ethan answered softly, "Just enough for those near to hear." "Maybe." But sometimes the time we lose is the price of change. Ryan swallowed hard. There was nothing left to say. He just stood there, staring at two men, two symbols, opposite yet bound. And in that moment, Airlux's first-class cabin was no longer a place of comfort, but a stage where justice quietly began its opening act. Footsteps echoed, steady, rehearsed, unshaken. Ryan Carter returned, tablet in hand, voice flat enough to chill the air. "Sir, I need your cooperation. Otherwise, you'll have to leave the flight." Ethan looked at him. No anger, no fear, only stillness. "Are you talking about policy or habit?" Ryan kept his professional smile. "About safety, sir. We don't want trouble." Ethan nodded slowly. "Safety. As long as someone looks like what you expect." Silence spread through the cabin. A few passengers lowered their heads, pretending to be busy with their phones. Ryan repeated, his tone sharper. "Sir, comply or deboard." Ethan smiled, a light smile. Barely a breath. Yet in that silence, it carried farther than protest ever could. "You know, some smiles aren't for surrender. They're for memory." Ryan blinked, uncertain. Ethan placed his hand on the ticket, his voice calm, deliberate. "I'll stay, because if people must leave a place just to fit someone's gaze, then no one in this world could ever sit where they belong." The woman in seat 2C looked up, eyes caught between fear and admiration. Her husband whispered, "He's getting himself in trouble." She answered softly, "No, he's teaching us how to hold our ground." Ryan tapped on his screen. "Sir, I'm calling the manager." "Go ahead." Ethan's smile didn't waver. "But before you do, remember, someone's watching." A young man in the back row lifted his phone slightly. The screen lit up, a single flash. Seat 3A appeared on his story. No one spoke aloud, but everyone felt it. Something was beginning to spread. Logan Pierce leaned over, voice dripping with disdain. "I've never seen anyone risk so much just for a seat." Ethan turned toward him, eyes steady. "Maybe you've never seen anyone risk it for self-respect." Logan scoffed. "Don't preach on my plane." Ethan replied softly, "Your plane, or fairness is plain." Ryan cut in, voice tight, trying to regain control. "Gentlemen, please, let's end this. If you don't leave, I'll have to call security." Ethan met his eyes. "Call whoever you like, but you can't call back a chance to do what's right." His voice wasn't loud, yet each word struck the air like church bells. A child in the back asked, "Mom, what did he do wrong?" The mother said nothing, just placed her hand on the child's shoulder and whispered, "Not everyone asked to leave is wrong." Another passenger began recording. Light from the window caught two faces. One defending procedure, the other is defending something larger. Ryan took a deep breath, forcing neutrality. "Sir, this is your final warning." Ethan smiled again. "Thank you for the warning. History often begins that way, with a warning given to the one who dares to say no." A middle-aged man in the back clapped once. The sound froze the room. Then another joined. And another. Ryan glanced around, uncertain, stepping half a pace back. Ethan stayed seated, eyes fixed on the window. "You know, I once thought silence was the safest way to stay unharmed. But silence kept too long only teaches mistakes they're accepted." A ray of sunlight touched his hand. Outside, it shimmered across the airline's golden logo, a reminder of the values it once promised. Ethan spoke quietly. "Sometimes justice doesn't start with a shout. It starts with one person who chooses to stay seated." Ryan said nothing, his first true silence. He looked around and saw the phones filming, saw Logan's tightening jaw, and saw himself. reflected in the calm smile of the man he'd tried to remove. Somewhere, a tweet went live. Man in seat 3A refuses to move, calmly fights for respect. Within minutes, thousands shared it. The hashtag #SauterSeat3 spread like a spark under a false sky. Ethan closed his eyes, head resting back. His smile was not made to win, but the smile of a man who knew. The storm had just begun. The hiss of the coffee machine filled the air, soft but cold. Ethan stood by the counter, card in hand, ready to scan. The attendant smiled, voice light and even. "Hello, may I see your ticket?" He placed it down, silent. The screen lit up. Brooks Global. A click, a pause. Then her tone shifted. Lower, cautious. "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Ethan nodded slightly. "I just want a cup of coffee." Her nervous smile flickered as if waking from a dream she shouldn't have had. "Of course, right away." Her smile stayed polite, but her eyes looked away, avoiding his. Ethan simply watched. The woman behind him wore a bright suit. When it was her turn, the tone changed instantly. "Good morning. Welcome back." Louder, warmer, brighter. Ethan whispered softly, more to himself. The language of people often shifts with who they think they're talking to. The attendant returned with the cup, steam curling upward. "Your coffee, sir. Sorry for the delay." He took it, smiling gently. "It's fine. Sometimes a few seconds of waiting help us see what really matters." She didn't understand, only bowed her head. He walked toward the lounge corner. Glass panels reflected dozens of faces, people reading newspapers, people scrolling phones, people hiding behind headphones, avoiding each other's eyes. Ethan sat down. The reflection of his face merged with the large words on the wall. "Luxury begins with care." He read it quietly. "Care begins with selection." A waiter pushed a dessert cart by. He stopped to greet two businessmen at the next table, their laughter loud. When he passed Ethan, he only nodded slightly, tray held tight to his chest. The smile disappeared somewhere between those 2 meters. Ethan looked at the glass ahead, saw the reflection of a man learning not to react, a man who knew when silence spoke louder than argument. He took a sip of coffee. The bitterness lingered on his tongue. A voice from the morning call echoed in his mind, his son's words. "They said I'm too sensitive." Ethan shook his head, answering the memory. "No. You just hear more clearly than others." The lounge speakers chimed, the soft rhythm of familiar announcements. A woman walked past, her eyes resting on him for a moment. She smiled genuine, not the kind built for logos on tickets. He smiled back, genuine too. It was a small moment, but enough for the glass to reflect a different image. No CEO. No titles, just 2 people recognizing each other. Another staff member approached, voice gentler than the first. "Mr. Brooks, would you like assistance with your luggage?" Ethan set his cup down, asking quietly, "Do you know why your voice just changed?" She blinked, confused. I don't understand." "That's all right. I just wanted you to notice." He stood, adjusting his coat. "We treat people kindly when we think they're important. But one day, when ordinary people are treated that way, that's when true class begins." She stayed silent. Ethan walked past the glass door, sunlight spilling over the floor. Luxury begins with care. He smiled again, softly. Care begins with respect. Outside, the hallway to the gate glowed bright. A voice called from behind, "Have a good flight, Mr. Brooks." Ethan didn't turn. "Thank you. I'll fly. But I hope the airline learns to take off too." His footsteps joined the flow of travelers. Every passing glance reflected something familiar back at him. He knew. The real test was just ahead. The lounge was only a small mirror, the cabin waiting beyond. It was a reflection of the world itself. The sound of wine pouring into glasses echoed like the whisper of division. Golden light danced on the leather seats, everything arranged to look perfect. Ryan walked down the aisle, his smile switching on exactly when and where it should. "Champagne, sir." "Thank you. I've always liked this brand." Ryan's smile brightened, friendly, effortless, rehearsed. Ethan watched, not angry, just observant. When Ryan turned toward him, his voice stumbled for half a second. "Would you like anything?" "Sir?" "Black coffee." "Yes." "Right away." No light in his eyes, no warmth in his tone, just a thin layer of cold between two people. Ethan opened his laptop, fingers moving slowly. On the screen appeared 3 words. Tone variance detected. He stared at them for a while, as if seeing the entire system through those words. Ryan returned, placing the cup on the tray table. No thanks given, no blame spoken, only distance, measured by tone and manner. The woman beside him leaned slightly. "They do treat people differently, don't they?" Ethan replied softly. "They react to surfaces, not to substance." A man in front laughed loudly. "Ryan, bring another bottle for my table. And some ice." "Of course." "Yes, sir." His voice lifted again. Brighter, warmer, perfectly pitched. Ethan tilted his head, smiling faintly. Like hearing a wordless melody he'd known all his life. He typed another note. Observation. Respect fluctuates with assumption. Besides it, a timestamp column. Every action, every smile, every glance recorded by the minute. Not to accuse, but to reveal. Ryan slowed his pace this time. He stopped beside Logan Pierce, who was reading a finance paper. "Mr. Pierce, the Airline's new magazine for you, sir." Logan nodded, smiling. "Good, you remembered. This crew's well trained." Ryan replied with quiet pride. "We serve based on our regulars' habits." Ethan looked up, voice low but clear. "And the unfamiliar?" Ryan hesitated. "I'm sorry, sir." "Nothing. Just noting how your airline defines hospitality." Logan chuckled softly. "Don't be so sensitive, my friend. Everyone gets the same service here." Ethan met his gaze. Steady, calm. "No, not everyone. Some are trusted before they even speak." A thin silence settled over the cabin. Ryan stepped back, adjusting his tie. He didn't respond, but his eyes shifted, uneasy, like someone seeing his reflection for the first time and not liking what looked back. Ethan took a sip of coffee. The bitterness spread across his tongue. He typed the next line. "Trust is invisible until it's tested." Across the aisle, a couple whispered, "They're at it again. Look." "What now?" "Probably another case of mistaken class." Soft laughter rippled outward, like oil spreading on water. Ethan stayed calm. His voice almost a note carried into the air. "There are cracks you can't see until the light passes through them." Ryan passed again with another tray. He didn't stop, but his eyes caught the glow of Ethan's laptop. The phrase tone variance detected is reflected in them. Ethan closed the lid gently, not hiding, not flaunting. "You see, everything's being recorded, not by cameras, but by the memory of those once looked through." Ryan lowered his head slightly, voice faint. "I'm just following procedure." Perhaps the problem is, who wrote the procedure? Outside, the engines began to hum. The plane was preparing to move. Inside, another test was about to begin, not between passenger and attendant, but between human beings and their conscience. Ethan opened the laptop again. The final line appeared. Next observation, reaction under pressure. He smiled softly, not to anyone else. Just the truth drawing closer. Clara Ortiz leaned down, adjusting her scarf, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're more flexible with our higher-tier members." Ethan looked up, his gaze calm. "Is that written anywhere?" She hesitated, her smile bending slightly. "No. But everyone knows the unspoken rule." "The unspoken rule," he repeated slowly, tasting each word. "One day, rules like that will become the reason for apologies that come too late." Clara lowered her head, avoiding his eyes. The air between them thickened, filled only by the quiet hum of the air vents. Ryan passed by, asking gently, "Is there a problem, Clara?" She answered quickly, "No, just a little misunderstanding." Ethan added softly, "Misunderstanding is what people call injustice before they're ready to name it." Ryan smiled politely. "We're just following procedure." Ethan replied, calm but clear. "The procedure isn't wrong, but the way people carry it out can betray its purpose." A few nearby passengers began to listen. The man in seat 2B lowered his newspaper, curiosity in his eyes. The young woman in 3C leaned toward her partner and whispered, "It sounds more like a lesson than an argument." Ethan nodded slightly, speaking as if to himself. People think politeness means silence, but sometimes silence is just permission wearing a nice suit. Clara's hands tightened, her voice trembled. "Sir, I'm just doing my job." "And you're doing it well," Ethan said gently. "But if the job asks you to bow to what's wrong, is it still a job?" She fell silent. An older passenger nearby nodded. Quiet empathy, needing no words. Ethan continued, his voice soft as wind. "I wrote dozens of policies for companies, but I learned what people follow isn't the text itself. It's the bias passed down through a smile." Ryan tried to regain control. "Sir, I think you're making everyone uncomfortable." Ethan met his eyes. "No, I'm just helping them hear what they usually tune out." A small ding broke the air. Someone started recording on their phone. No shouting, no chaos. Just 3 people talking about fairness. In a cabin built for comfort. Clara glanced at her small device, fingers shaking. "We have separate guidelines for VIP customers." "And who defines VIP?" "The company does." Ethan nodded. "The company? Or the people trained to forget they're human too?" The tension thickened. Light reflected off a glass of wine, scattering into 1,000 tiny shards. Ethan looked at it, speaking softly. "When that light hits another's eyes, it stops being beauty. It just blinds." Clara bit her lip. "Who are you?" "The one who wrote the very policies you're following." She froze. Ryan gave a stiff laugh. "How interesting, sir. Then you must understand what we do to protect the company's image." Ethan nodded. "I do. But I also know protecting an image shouldn't mean losing a soul." A passenger whispered, "Is anyone filming this?" "Yeah, it's live already." Ryan glanced around, his smile fading. Clara's breathing quickened. Ethan stayed calm. "You're not wrong, Clara. What's wrong is how the system taught you to place your smile in the wrong direction." Her eyes filled with tears. I just don't want to lose my job," Ethan replied softly. "You won't lose your job for being kind. The only real loss is when kindness itself disappears." A minute of silence stretched long. Only the steady hum of the engines remained. Ethan opened his laptop and typed one final line. "Policy observed. Kindness restricted by hierarchy." He closed it gently, lifting his eyes toward the cockpit door. Maybe it's time to talk to the one who wrote these rules. His voice lowered, but his gaze grew brighter. A storm was forming. Right in the calm air of control, Maya Lopez sat in the last row, headphones still on, though the sound had long been gone. She heard every word drifting from the front, low, steady, controlled. In that golden cabin light, everything seemed peaceful, until she caught the look in the man's eyes at seat 3A. Maya pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling slightly. The red recording light blinked, quiet, unwavering, like a heartbeat. Every act of injustice always has one accidental witness. She zoomed in, saw Ryan trying to hold a perfect smile, saw Clara step back, her eyes dim with shame, and in the middle of the frame, the man sat still, hand resting on his closed laptop, his calm smile terrifyingly composed. "Who is he?" Maya whispered, almost to herself. The man beside her shrugged. "Don't know, but something's different. He's not fighting back. He's making everyone hear themselves." The plane tilted slightly, light washing across the rows, touching faces pretending not to listen. Some passengers glanced forward. Others looked down, afraid the truth might recognize them. Maya opened her notes app and typed a few words. Discrimination in silence feels louder than shouting. She looked back at her recording, each frame carrying a restrained kind of fury. Ryan's voice broke through again. "Sir, you need to understand. This isn't personal." Ethan lifted his head, his tone so calm it hollowed Ryan's words. "Every act can begin with a rule, but every mistake begins with a choice." Maya inhaled deeply. She had once been a flight attendant, trained to smile at things she couldn't change. But now she realized, if no one records it, Truth disappears like vapor in first-class air. The man beside her whispered, "You're really going to post that?" She nodded. "I'm going to show the world how people talk about respect, but forget how to practice it." He hesitated. "You'll get in trouble." Maya smiled sadly. "Maybe, but I've been in trouble my whole life." For staying silent. She adjusted the angle, capturing Ryan checking his tablet, Clara standing beside him, her hands clenched white. Ethan said nothing. He just stared ahead, as if waiting for something bigger. A cool breeze drifted through as the air system shifted. No one spoke, but everyone could feel something coming. Logan Pierce leaned back, his tone sharp. "This is ridiculous. All this over one seat." Ethan opened his eyes, gaze steady. "It's not the seat. It's where a person stands in someone else's eyes." A chill ran down Maya's spine. She didn't know who he was. But every word he spoke sounded like it was written for every flight she'd ever worked. She remembered the times she'd smiled through injustice, because her duty was to keep calm. Now, she didn't have to anymore. She tapped Go Live. The screen read, "Live to 12 viewers." Within a minute, it rose to 70. Then 300. Ethan's voice came through the mic, clear and unwavering. "If fairness only exists when power allows it, then we've never truly left the ground." Maya swallowed hard, her heart pounding. Comments began to flood the live feed. "Who is he? Which airline is this? Keep recording." The red light kept blinking. Steady, defiant, like a drumbeat inside the storm forming around them. Ryan stepped back, realizing something had slipped beyond his control. Clara turned toward Ethan, eyes wide, as if seeing herself again for the first time in years of uniformed silence. Maya whispered, her voice almost lost in the air, "I'm sorry for every time I didn't speak." Then she pressed save. The screen flashed. "Here's seat 3A uploaded successfully." She looked up, eyes fixed on the front. The man in seat 3A sat still, his eyes catching the cabin light. And she knew, from that moment on, the world would never be silent again. Clara turned back, her face trying hard to stay composed. Her voice was soft but clear. "Sir, we can offer another seat. And complimentary miles." Ethan looked up, his smile faint, unreadable. Miles have value, but respect doesn't come with a price. The cabin froze. No murmurs, no clinking glasses, just the sound of breathing caught between soft light and unease. Ryan stood behind Clara, hand gripping his tablet. He forced a smile. "Sir, this is just the airline's way of resolving things smoothly." Ethan tilted his head slightly. Smoothly? Or comfortably for the conscience?" Clara pressed her lips together. "We didn't mean to offend you. And I'm not asking for compensation. I'm asking to be seen as human." The words fell like a pebble on still water. Not loud, but spreading ripples no one could ignore. Logan Pierce let out a short laugh. "Ridiculous. They're offering you a better seat, and you're giving a lecture." Ethan turned to him, voice low and steady. "Some people spend their whole lives sitting in the wrong place, and still think they're right where they belong." Ryan tried to step in, his tone tight. "Sir, please understand, no one wants this to get out of control." Ethan met his eyes. "The issue isn't control. It's who gets to hold it." A woman in the back drew a sharp breath, her hand over her heart. The man beside her whispered, "I've never heard anyone say that on a plane." Clara inhaled deeply, her shoulders trembling to stay straight. "You're making this hard for me." "No," Ethan said quietly. "I'm helping you see that the system you believe is neutral is already tilted." Ryan placed a hand on her shoulder. "Let's go. I'll inform the captain." Ethan's voice rose, not loud but clear enough to fill the cabin. "The captain? The one who controls the plane. Is he brave enough to control fairness too?" Several passengers pulled out their phones. Maya at the back kept recording, the red light still blinking. Clara turned again, fear and shame flickering in her eyes. "What do you want?" "Not much," Ethan said softly. "Just a simple acknowledgement that these rules aren't fair." No one answered. The hum of the engines filled the silence, a reminder that time kept moving even when morality stood still. Clara looked around, searching for a sympathetic glance. None came. Everyone avoided her eyes, as if even a look could be caught on camera. Ethan looked down at his table, finger brushing the rim of a cold coffee cup. Do you know the worst thing in any system? She shook her head. It's not mistakes. It's when people start accepting them as normal. Clara swallowed hard, her voice trembling. You're making me feel ashamed. No, Ethan replied, meeting her eyes. I'm reminding you that you were once good. Ryan's tone dropped, for the first time losing its professional polish. Sir, do you even know who you're talking to? Ethan smiled gently. Of course, I'm talking to the human part of you, the part your rules keep locked away. A young man in seat 2D spoke up. He's right, they didn't have to talk to him like that. The woman beside him tugged his sleeve. Shh, stay out of it. But it was too late. The silence of the crowd had been broken. Ethan nodded toward the man in thanks, then looked around. See, we don't need to shout. We just need one person brave enough to speak. Clara lowered her eyes, her voice catching. Then, what do you want me to do? Tell the truth, even if it scares you. She clenched her hands, breathing unevenly. Some of the policies might be biased. Ethan smiled softly. Thank you. Truth is always the first gift of change. Ryan turned away, eyes avoiding everything. Logan stayed silent, the arrogance fading from his face. Ethan spoke again, voice light as wind. I don't need another seat. I don't need bonus miles. I just need to see fairness fly. Without needing an upgrade. The cabin fell quiet once more, but this time no one looked away. They were listening. And in that moment, first class became the very first classroom for human dignity. Ryan took another step forward, his voice turning cold. You know, sir, every action has consequences. Ethan looked up, his smile unchanged. Then, let them come. The entire cabin seemed to stop breathing. No one moved. Only the soft hum of the engines remained, like a heartbeat, testing the patience of humankind. Ryan inhaled deeply. You're damaging the airline's image, Ethan replied softly. No, I'm giving it a chance to have a real one. Clara glanced around, her voice trembling. Ryan, stop. This isn't simple anymore. He turned sharply, eyes cutting. Be quiet, Clara, you don't understand. Ethan interjected, gentle as a note written in the air. She does. She understands more than you think. Ryan's fist tightened. Sir, do you even know who you're up against? Ethan tilted his head slightly, voice calm as mist. Against habit. And that's the strongest force on Earth. A man in row 4 spoke up. He's just talking. Why are you threatening him? Ryan spun around. Sir, this doesn't concern you. Ethan nodded toward the man. Thank you for not staying silent. Maya kept recording from the back. The tiny red light on her phone blinked. Steady, determined, like a witness to history. Online. The live stream viewer count climbed by the second. No one in the cabin knew that thousands were already watching how a man was tested simply for asking to be treated with dignity. Ryan's voice dropped low. You're putting me under pressure. Ethan answered slowly. I'm only reflecting the same pressure you've grown comfortable giving to others. Logan Pierce rose from his seat, his tone sharp. Enough. Call security. Get him off this plane. Ethan turned, eyes steady. You'd do that, Logan? Throw someone out for not bowing? Logan smirked, but the power in it was gone. This is my cabin. No, Ethan said quietly. This is everyone's sky. Clara covered her mouth, eyes glistening. Ryan, stop. Please don't make another mistake. He looked at her, voice cracking beneath his control. If I stop now, I'll lose my position. Ethan replied softly. And if you don't, you'll lose yourself. Silence hung heavy. The cabin light reflected in Ryan's eyes, where he saw himself shrinking. All the confidence drilled into him through training, fading under the quiet truth of a stranger. A passenger whispered, He's right. We've been quiet too long. Another voice followed. Yeah, he's just saying what we all think. Each word spread like sparks through dry air. Fear giving way to courage. Ryan stepped back half a pace. Fine. You win. Ethan shook his head. I don't want to win. I just want people to wake up. He looked around, his tone calm, almost tender. I used to believe respect could be taught, but no, it only wakes up when people start seeing themselves in others. Clara nodded faintly, tears slipping down her face. Ryan said nothing. No defense left, no excuses. Just a man standing on the edge of regret and redemption. Ethan leaned back, exhaling slowly. Do you know the strange thing about Justice Ryan? Ryan's voice was small. What is it? It doesn't need permission to exist. A wave of silence swept through the cabin. Then, suddenly, someone began to clap. Another joined. The applause wasn't loud, but it was real. Not for victory, but for courage. Ryan lowered his head. I'm sorry. Ethan nodded gently. Then you're finally ready to fly. Every pair of eyes turned toward him, not because of who he was, but because of what he reminded them to be. First class had just become the first lesson in human equality. And in the last row, Maya whispered as her camera kept rolling, every injustice finds its witness, and sometimes the witness becomes courageous. The sound of an airport announcement echoed in memory, cold and distant. Ethan stared out the airplane window that day, the sky blurred behind tears. He was younger then. Black suit, eyes red from sleepless nights. The ticket in his hand was an upgrade from economy to first class. A small favor from an employee who'd known his mother. A small gift for a farewell flight. As he lifted his bag into the overhead bin, a voice stopped him. Excuse me, sir, you're in the wrong seat. Ethan looked up. I have an upgrade note from the ticket counter. We don't have that on record. Please return to the back. He tried to keep his tone calm. I'm sorry, but I need to make it in time for the funeral. She smiled lightly. You'll still get there, just not from here. The man beside her chuckled dryly. Don't make trouble, friend. That seat's not for you. Ethan looked down at his hands. The tie was straight. His shoes were clean. Yet somehow he had become the one told to stand up. He gathered his things slowly. No one helped. No one spoke. They just watched him pass, like watching a scene that didn't concern them. In the back of the plane, a baby cried louder than the engines. He took the last empty seat. In his hand, the ticket crumpled. Outside the window, the sky was painfully blue. Humiliation becomes a habit when unchallenged. He thought of his mother, the woman who once told him that dignity never needed a first-class ticket. She said, "One day, you'll see. Those who hurt others often do it because they fear themselves." He nodded then, too young to understand. But that day, when he was told to move, he finally did. Fear breeds contempt, and silence feeds them both. The plane took off. He looked toward the rows ahead. Calm faces, no one turning back. A man eating, a woman reading, a flight attendant pouring wine. No one knew that in the very last row. A man was learning how to hold back tears with dignity. When they landed, he was the last to leave. Not by choice, but because no one stepped aside. A female attendant stood by the door, smiling faintly. Hope your flight was pleasant. Ethan only nodded. He had stopped believing in apologies spoken out of duty. Outside, the wind was strong. He checked his phone, his mother's final message before she passed. Fly high, but never forget to look down, to see who you've flown over. That line stayed with him, carved deep inside. The next day, he went back to work, smiled at everyone, as if nothing had happened. But inside, he knew. A part of him had died on that flight. From that day on, he swore never to let silence become habit. He began documenting everything, small gestures, subtle tones, invisible biases, not for revenge, but to prepare for the moment he'd face it again. And now, sitting in seat 3A, when Ryan said, "There will be consequences," when Clara lowered her eyes in fear, when Maya's hands trembled as she filmed, Ethan realized this was the moment his mother spoke of. A man must fly high, not through status, but through integrity. He closed his eyes, listening to the wind outside. His mother's voice echoed through time. A lesson reborn. Humiliation becomes a habit when unchallenged. And today, that habit was about to awaken. The sky outside was still blue, but for the first time in his life, it felt truly clear. Daniel Reeves stepped in, uniform crisp, eyes hard as steel. "Sir, I need you to step outside for a word." Ethan stood up, but didn't leave his seat. He just looked straight ahead, voice calm, almost serene. "If you want to talk about fairness, we can do it right here." Daniel frowned. "You're causing a disturbance. I need your cooperation." "Disturbance?" Ethan spoke slowly. "You think asking for respect is disturbing?" The entire cabin fell silent. Every gaze turned toward them. Ryan shifted aside. Clara gripped the table edge, and Logan sat stiff, jaw tight. Daniel lowered his tone. "You're making everyone uncomfortable. There's a better way to handle this." Ethan nodded slightly. "There is, but the system only listens when there's an audience." Maya kept recording from the back. The small red light on her phone glimmered in Daniel's eyes. He hesitated. "You're aware you're being filmed, right?" "Yes," Ethan said. "And I hope you understand why I'm not afraid." Daniel took half a step closer. "I've been ordered to remove you from this flight if you don't comply." Ethan glanced at the seat. "Then do it. But before you do, take a look around." Daniel hesitated. His eyes swept the cabin, 20 faces watching. Silent, but no longer neutral. A passenger spoke up. "This isn't right. That seat clearly belongs to him." Another added, "We saw it from the start." Nobody believes that weight balance excuse. Daniel turned to Ryan, then Clara. Both kept their heads down. He drew a deep breath. "I can't act unless the crew confirms it." Ethan tilted his head. "Then ask them." Ryan swallowed hard. "We made an error in the seating assignment." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "Are you sure?" Ryan nodded. "I'm sure. And I apologize." The air cracked open. A simple apology. But it carried the weight of an entire system. Daniel stood frozen, eyes flickering. He knew. Power had just changed direction. Ethan's voice softened. "You see, when people realize they're wrong, the task isn't to drag them away. It's to help them stand again." Daniel looked down. "You're not afraid of being banned from flying?" Ethan smiled gently. "If the price of justice is a ban, I'll pay it." A woman in the second row began clapping. A lone sound at first, then another, and another. The applause spread. Slow, steady, heavy like the heartbeat of something being repaired. Daniel sighed, lifted his radio. "Control, cancel the removal order. The passenger stays." His voice cracked. "We need to review our procedures." He turned to Ethan. "I'm sorry, sir. I was just following protocol." "That's all right," Ethan said softly. "What matters is knowing when to stop." Daniel nodded and stepped away. Ryan bowed his head deeply, unable to look up. Clara met Ethan's eyes, tears glistening. "Thank you for not shouting, for making people listen." Ethan smiled, light as air. Sometimes silence has its own voice, if we use it at the right time. Maya lowered her phone. "You know," she whispered, "this video, it'll wake thousands." Ethan looked out the window, voice fading to a whisper. "Good, because justice doesn't need to go viral. It just needs to be seen." Outside, the sky was still bright. The plane hadn't taken off yet, but inside every heart on board, something had already begun to fly. Daniel Reeves tightened the radio in his hand, his voice dropping low. "Under FAA Regulation 42C, I have the authority to request the removal of a passenger who refuses to comply." Ethan looked straight at him, unblinking. "Then read the rest, Daniel." Daniel hesitated. Ethan spoke slowly, each word measured and clear. "The same regulation states, a passenger can only be removed if they pose a threat to flight safety. I haven't done that." The cabin went silent. Ryan lowered his head. Clara's hands clenched together, afraid even a breath might break the fragile air. Daniel drew in a steadying breath, his tone stiff. "You're twisting language to hide your defiance." Ethan smiled faintly. "No, I'm using language to shield justice. The thing too many have forgotten." Logan Pierce leaned forward, his voice rough with anger. "Enough. This isn't a courtroom." Ethan turned toward him, his eyes sharp enough to pierce arrogance itself. Any place with injustice is a courtroom, Logan. The only judge here is conscience. Daniel glanced down at the printed guide in his hand. He began to read again, slower this time, like a man lost in a maze of his own rules. FAA 42C, subsection 4, exceptions for certain situations. His voice weakened. Ethan continued without looking. Exceptions apply only if a passenger acts violently, makes threats, or tampers with safety equipment. I'm simply sitting. A murmur spread through the cabin. A man in the middle rows nodded. He's right. I'm an aviation engineer. I've read those clauses. Daniel exhaled heavily. Who are you to know every line by heart? Ethan's voice was soft. I'm the one who helped to design the FAA data analysis system while you were still in training. A ripple moved through the air. Logan turned sharply. What did you say? Ethan met his eyes. My name is Ethan Brooks, CEO of Brooks Global Systems. Our company built the safety infrastructure for 12 of the world's largest airlines. And today, I'm just a passenger, asked to leave, seat 3A. Ryan's eyes closed, his face pale. Clara's breath hitched in her throat. Daniel stepped back, staring at the man before him. You're Ethan Brooks. Yes. A long silence fell, stretching like time itself. Ethan spoke again, his tone calm but resonant. I helped write the very laws you're using to threaten me, and I wrote them to protect people, not to justify contempt. Daniel swallowed hard, sweat glistening on his forehead. What do you want from me? Nothing, Ethan said softly. Just remember, authority doesn't live in a uniform. It lives in how you choose to use it. A woman in a row 3 spoke up. This is the first time I've heard someone say that so calmly. Another voice followed. He didn't yell, didn't insult anyone. He just made everyone ashamed of the truth. Daniel turned away, avoiding the reflection of himself. You're putting me in a difficult position. Ethan shook his head gently. No, Daniel, I'm reminding you of the part of yourself that rules can't teach. But justice can awaken. Logan's voice cracked with frustration. All this over one seat. Ethan's tone was warm, but heavy. No, over one way of seeing. The words echoed through the air, soft but seismic. Everyone stilled. Everyone felt something inside them shift. Daniel lowered the radio. You win. Ethan smiled faintly. No one wins. Because if anyone loses, we all do. Ryan lifted his head, eyes red. Sir, I'm sorry, I was wrong from the start. It's all right, Ethan said slowly. The most human thing we can do is correct ourselves, Clara whispered through trembling lips. He's right. The rules aren't wrong. It's how we use them. Daniel nodded. Maybe this is the first time I've ever learned that on my own flight. Ethan looked around the cabin. Thank you for listening. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of something unforgettable. Maya lowered her phone, whispering softly, 70 people on this plane, and one man just reminded us of the value of silence with reason. Outside, the wind brushed along the wing. No one spoke, but everyone knew. From this moment on, every flight would carry more than passengers. It would carry conscience. Ethan reached into the pocket of his vest. A silver card caught the soft yellow cabin light. He placed it gently on the table in front of Ryan. The small metallic sound rang out like a church bell in silence. The airline logo gleamed. Platinum. 8 million miles. A lifetime carved into metal. Ryan froze. Clara lowered her head. For a few seconds, there was no sound, only the echo of hearts beating inside a sealed room. Ethan looked straight ahead. Still think I'm in the wrong seat. Ryan opened his mouth, but no words came. Clara tried to speak, her voice trembling. I didn't know. Ethan interrupted softly, firm but calm. You don't need to know. Just look. And ask yourself why. Every time someone like me sits here, your first instinct is doubt instead of welcome. Ryan's hands trembled. He stared at the card, then at the man he had dismissed minutes ago as a difficult passenger. I was wrong, he whispered. No, Ethan said quietly. You weren't wrong alone. This mistake belongs to all of us. I'm just the mirror. Clara bit her lip, tears falling onto the table. I didn't mean to. Ethan's voice softened. You did mean to. You just didn't dare admit it. Maya kept filming, but the camera slowly lowered. She wasn't recording a confrontation anymore. She was recording a lesson. Through the lens, Ryan's face came into focus. No arrogance left, only shame and realization. Logan Pierce finally spoke, his voice low. You've flown 8 million miles. Why didn't you say that from the start? Ethan smiled faintly, each word deliberate. Because I shouldn't have to speak to be treated right. If respect only comes after proof of status, then it isn't respect. His words spread through the cabin, slow and steady, like wind whispering through walls of old prejudice. Ryan pressed a hand to his chest. I used to be proud of my service. Ethan looked at him, and you should be. But pride isn't about choosing who deserves kindness. Clara wiped her tears. I want to start over. Ethan nodded gently. Then start with one thing. Remember every passenger's name, not to say it right, but to remember they each carry a story. A man from the middle row spoke up. He's right. My name's Carl. No one from this airline ever remembered it. Another voice joined, and I was once asked to move because my shoes were old. Voices began to rise, one by one, like an underground river finally finding air. Ryan stood still, eyes glistening. I'm sorry. Truly. Ethan nodded, his gaze warm again. Apologies don't erase mistakes, but they open the path to what's right. Daniel Reeves, the security officer, stepped forward, his voice rough. Mr. Brooks, if I had known who you were, Ethan interrupted softly. You don't need to know who I am, Daniel. What matters is that you've just witnessed a moment that could save your company. The cabin was utterly still. Light reflected off the platinum card, lying in the center like a mirror for every conscience inside. A passenger murmured he could buy this entire airline, but he stayed to teach it how to fly right. Ethan smiled. I didn't come to teach anyone. I just came to remind you that the human heart has its own weight limit. When it's overloaded with bias, it falls. Clara bowed her head deeper. Ryan stepped back, voice trembling. Thank you for not walking away. Ethan replied softly. If I had walked away, I'd have become part of the silence that allowed this. His eyes swept across the cabin. Thank you for listening. If one day someone else is treated like I was today, remember, first class isn't at the front. It's in how we treat each other. Applause spread across the cabin, not loud, but awakening. Ryan bowed deeply. Mr. Brooks, please return to seat 3A. Ethan smiled, peace in his eyes. I've been there all along, Ryan, just not on your seating chart. He picked up the silver card and slipped it back into his pocket. The air in the cabin felt lighter, washed clean. No one spoke, but everyone knew. This flight had changed direction. Outside, the sky was impossibly blue, and for the first time, it felt like fairness could fly. Daniel Reeves stepped into the cabin, his steps slowing the moment he saw Ethan's face. The air was still, the kind of silence that follows a storm without wind. His eyes landed on the platinum card that had just been tucked away. He drew a breath, his voice faltering. Sir, I didn't know. Ethan looked at him, voice quiet, but sharp enough to slice through the air. Exactly. The silence deepened. Daniel glanced at Ryan, then at Clara. Both looked away, like students caught hiding a test they forgot to turn in. You're Ethan Brooks? Daniel asked, though everyone already knew. Yes, Ethan replied. There was no pride in his tone, only truth. Daniel exhaled slowly. Sir, I apologize for this experience. I'll make sure those responsible are dealt with. Ethan tilted his head slightly. Dealt with? Or covered up? His voice wasn't raised, yet it carried through every ear in the cabin. Daniel froze. I don't understand. You do, Ethan said calmly. You understand exactly how an apology can become a new wall built over an old one. Daniel swallowed hard. I just want to make things right. With what? Ethan asked softly. Bonus miles, vouchers, or another internal report that gets forgotten in 3 days. Each word pierced through the thin skin of corporate excuses. Ryan turned toward Daniel, his voice trembling. "He's not angry. He's just right." "Quiet," Daniel ordered. "No," Ryan said firmly for the first time. "We were wrong, and we can't fix wrong with the same paper that created it." Daniel looked around, meeting the eyes of the passengers. None of them was neutral anymore. Ethan folded his arms, voice calm but unyielding. "Do you know why I'm still sitting here?" Daniel stayed silent. "Because I wanted to see how a system reacts when it finally has to look in the mirror." Daniel's jaw tightened. "You're damaging the company's image." Ethan smiled faintly. "No, Daniel, I'm saving it. The real damage happens when silence gets mistaken for professionalism." A woman in the front row spoke softly. "He's right. This airline used to be known for kindness, but only for those with cards." Daniel turned, voice cracking. "Please, everyone, stay quiet." The woman shook her head. "We've been quiet long enough." Ethan looked at Daniel. "You see, when justice speaks, it doesn't need a microphone." Daniel sank into the seat across from him. "So what do you want?" Ethan met his eyes, calm and steady. "I want you to listen." Daniel sighed. "You're a platinum client. You have the right to speak directly with the CEO. I'll arrange it." Ethan smiled gently. "You still don't understand. I'm not speaking for myself. I'm speaking for those without platinum cards. For those who are told to move every time someone decides they don't look refined enough." Silence fell again. Heavy, honest. Daniel nodded slowly. "You'll receive an official apology." "I don't need an apology," Ethan said softly. "I need change." Ryan's hands tightened. "I'll testify to everything." Clara looked up, eyes glistening. "So will I." Maya stepped forward, her voice steady. "I have the video, and I'll make it public." Daniel turned, his voice dropping. "If you do that, we'll all lose our jobs." Ethan shook his head. "No, you'll lose your fear and regain your dignity." Daniel looked at him for a long time. Something shifted behind his eyes. His voice came out smaller. "Maybe I forgot why I started this job." Ethan replied softly. "For people, Daniel, only for people." A soft ding echoed through the cabin. The intercom announced a delay. "Technical issue under review." Ethan turned toward the window. A thin trail of golden oil slid down the metal wing. "See that?" he said slowly. "A small leak ignored long enough can bring down more than a machine." Daniel followed his gaze, his shoulders sinking. "I'll have it rechecked." Ethan nodded. For the first time, "You just said the right thing." The cabin fell silent again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was awakening. One man, one airline, and an entire system finally remembered how to breathe. Maya stared at her phone screen. The cursor blinked against an empty caption box. She typed slowly, one word at a time. "Schicht's seat 3A. Calm is not weakness." Then she pressed the post. The video was only 3 minutes long. No music, no filters, just the image of a man sitting still in the quiet storm of prejudice. 10 seconds later, the view count ticked to 20. 1 minute later, 300. 10 minutes later, tens of thousands. Social media ignited. Comments poured in faster than she could read. "Who is the man in 3A? Never seen someone stay calm and still look that powerful. Calm is not weakness. I need that on my office wall." A major news outlet reposted it. An aviation lawyer wrote a full analysis titled "The Passenger's Right to Dignity." A retired pilot commented simply, "He didn't raise his voice. He made the entire system quiet enough to listen." The hashtag #RashedSeat3A hit trending within hours. People everywhere began sharing their own stories. A young woman wrote, "I was once told to leave my seat because I wore a hoodie. Now I know it wasn't my fault." A nurse added, "They thought my upgrade card was fake. Watching this, I finally saw myself." An older man wrote, "I've flown 2 million miles and never been treated with respect. Now I know I'm not alone." Clips spread across platforms. Someone cut Ethan's line. "Respect costs nothing." Set it to soft piano, and the world replayed it millions of times. Headlines appeared. "Who is the man in seat 3A?" Charter Seat 3A forces the airline industry to face itself. A journalist recognized the face in the video. Her post contained only 4 words. Ethan Brooks, still seated. By afternoon, the airline's headquarters were flooded with calls. The PR department couldn't keep up. Every caller asked the same thing. Was it really him? In the corporate office, screens glowed with the trending tag. Charter C3A. Calm is not weakness. A PR manager whispered, "We've never seen a wave like this." Daniel Reeves stood near the doorway, eyes dim. He replayed the clip of Ethan telling him, "Silence has its own voice if you use it at the right time." Daniel sighed. He just did what hundreds of PR campaigns couldn't. He made people believe in what's right again. Maya's phone buzzed with a new message from an anonymous account. "Thank you for recording. You didn't just capture an image. You captured humanity remembering itself." She smiled. She knew exactly who it was. At that moment, Ethan sat alone in a small airport lounge, watching the same video spread across the world. He wasn't proud. He wasn't triumphant. Just a quiet smile, as if he had met a younger version of himself. He whispered, "Calm is not weakness. It's how the strongest teach without shouting." A young attendant passing by stopped, eyes wide. "You're the man from seat 3A?" Ethan nodded. "Yes." She hesitated. "Thank you for speaking up. I work for the airline, too." Ethan smiled. "Then start by listening, especially to those with the smallest voices." She nodded, her eyes bright. Outside, planes lined up for their next departure. On the terminal screen, a new notice appeared. New safety and dignity policy, under review. The hashtag kept spreading across the globe. People weren't talking about a seat anymore. They were talking about how people treat each other. They weren't discussing first class. They were discussing human worth. Pinned under Maya's video was one top comment. "In a world that shouts, one calm voice made us listen." Beneath it, Ethan had left a single reply. "Thank you for hearing." Just 5 words, but they made millions fall silent for a few seconds because everyone understood. Sometimes calmness is the loudest voice justice ever has. A single drop slid down the window. No one noticed it first, but Ethan did. The second drop followed, spreading across the silver metal like a thin vein of amber. Under the light, it shimmered red. Too red. He frowned, leaning closer, then turned to Ryan. "The wing's leaking fuel." Ryan glanced briefly, voice cool and dismissive. "No, sir, that's condensation." Ethan kept his gaze steady. "Condensation isn't red, Ryan." Ryan smirked. "Sir, please. Our maintenance is thorough." Ethan nodded slightly. "So thorough it can't see what's right in front of it." Ryan sighed, annoyed. "You're making me uncomfortable," Ethan replied quietly. "No, I'm trying to stop something worse than discomfort." Clara froze nearby, her eyes shifting between them. Ethan's tone lowered, calm but cutting. "Do you know how many disasters start with a single drop ignored?" Ryan folded his arms. "Sir, don't lecture me. I've worked here for 12 years. Ethan looked at him evenly. "And sometimes 12 years of routine blinds you to what's right in front of you." Clara leaned closer to the window. She squinted, then stepped back, her voice shaking. "Ryan, it really looks different." He snapped. "Clara, stop panicking. There's nothing wrong." Ethan's voice came soft, deliberate. "You don't have to believe me. Just believe the light. It doesn't lie." A faint red glow reflected on the cabin floor, long and bleeding. From the back, Maya lifted her camera. The lens caught it all, the glow, the drip, and Ethan's unnervingly calm face. Clara whispered, "I should call maintenance." Ryan cut her off. "If you do that, this flight gets grounded. Everyone will panic." Ethan met his eyes, voice like still water. "And if you don't, we might never land." Silence rippled through the cabin. Daniel Reeves stepped in. "What's going on?" Ethan spoke plainly. "The wing is leaking fuel." Daniel frowned. "We'll handle it after takeoff. Please trust me." Ethan shook his head. "No. I used to oversee safety systems. One drop every 5 seconds means pressure loss. If we take off, that drop becomes fire. Every breath in the cabin stopped. Maya's lens zoomed in just as another drop fell, glinting red under the cabin lights like a warning from the sky itself. Daniel's voice cracked. "Are you sure?" Ethan answered softly. "I've never been sure of anything, except when lives are at stake." Ryan stepped back, face pale. "Oh my God." Clara looked at him, her voice trembling. "Now you believe him?" Ethan placed a calm hand on the table. "We haven't taken off yet. There's still time to do the right thing." Daniel nodded sharply and called out, "Stop the engines. Get maintenance here now." Through the window, Maya filmed as a technician ran to the wing. He looked once, then shouted into his radio. A flurry of movement followed outside. Inside, someone whispered, "He just saved this flight." Another replied, "No, he saved us from our own complacency." Ethan exhaled, eyes fixed on the faint flicker of red light. "Justice and safety are the same," he said quietly. "No one notices them until something starts to leak." Clara wiped her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Brooks." Ethan smiled gently. "Don't thank me. Just remember, the right thing is never late. Unless we stay silent." Maya lowered her camera, voice soft. "From now on, Seat 3A won't just mean prejudice. It'll stand for warning and awakening." Outside, the final drop stopped. Ethan nodded slowly. This plane was saved because someone looked 2 seconds longer. Daniel turned to him, gratitude in his eyes. "I'll remember this for the rest of my life." Ethan replied quietly, "Don't just remember it, Daniel. Live it." A gust of wind brushed the cabin window. The red reflection faded. Everyone exhaled at once. No one spoke, but all of them knew. It wasn't just the plane that had been saved. It was the way they saw the world. Maya looked at Ethan, her hands trembling. "How can you still be calm?" Ethan stared out the window, where cabin lights blurred across cold metal. "Anger clouds data." His voice was soft, but clear enough for everyone to hear. Maya hesitated. "But you have every right to be angry. Anyone would." Ethan shook his head slowly. "Anger is fire. I need light." He unlocked his phone and typed a short sequence. A coded alert flashed across the screen. An internal security protocol. Level 3 operational warning. It was transmitted straight to the airline's central command. Clara's voice wavered. "What are you doing?" Ethan didn't look up. "Reporting a safety risk. And a cultural one." Ryan frowned. "Cultural?" Ethan nodded. "Because a technical flaw can be fixed in an hour, but a flaw in how we treat each other might take a generation." Maya's eyes glistened. "You say you're not angry, but you're fighting." Ethan answered quietly. "Fighting doesn't always mean noise. Sometimes it means staying silent long enough for others to finally hear themselves." Daniel's phone buzzed. He read the screen aloud. "Level 3 alert. Cross-functional audit triggered?" He looked up, startled. "What did you just do?" Ethan met his gaze, calm and steady. "I just turned on the mirror. If one person sees a problem and no one believes it, let the data prove it." Daniel's brow furrowed. "This will launch a full investigation. Media, operations, management, everything." Ethan smiled faintly. "Good. If a single drop can reveal the whole system's cracks, then the system deserves inspection." Ryan gripped his seat arm. "You're ruining my career." Ethan looked at him without malice. "No, Ryan, I'm saving you from a career built on fear," Clara whispered. "What about us?" "If they blame the lower staff." Ethan turned to her. "Those who are honest will stand. Those who live by pretending will fall." Maya glanced at her phone. "The Seat 3A video just hit 10 million views." Ethan nodded once. "That's not success. That's an opportunity. Don't let it drown in noise." Daniel sank into the seat opposite him. "I tried to keep things calm, so no one would panic." Ethan looked at him quietly. "And that calm killed trust. Not every crash comes from engines. Some start from silence." Maya asked softly, "You know this video will change the whole airline, don't you?" Ethan shook his head. "I'm not thinking about the airline. I'm thinking about the people in the back rows. The ones taught to bow in order to fly." Clara's voice broke. "Why didn't you reveal who you were earlier?" Ethan's gaze deepened. "If I told them who I was, they'd act differently. I needed to see who they really were when they thought I was no one. Daniel lifted his head. So now what? Ethan replied. Now, nothing. Just let the light keep shining. Truth always does the rest. Ryan slowly removed his name badge and placed it on the table. I want to start over, not with a title, but with respect. Clara reached for his hand, eyes wet. Me too. Ethan smiled gently. Then start by treating the next person better than the last. Sometimes change begins with saying someone's name right. Maya's phone vibrated again. Central audit accepted. Full review scheduled within 24 hours. She looked up. You won. Ethan smiled faintly. No, we just began. He leaned back, light from the window cutting softly across his face. His voice dropped, steady and low. Strength isn't about standing still. It's about not being dragged into someone else's storm. Maya held her phone tightly. She knew this wasn't the end of a story. It was the start of something larger, a movement, an awakening, a reminder that calm is not weakness. Calm is what happens when truth finally knows its worth. Aaron bent down and shone his flashlight under the wing. The beam swept across a damp red streak, spreading like the vein of a wounded body calling for help. He straightened slowly, his face hardening. Hydraulic leak confirmed. Those 3 words hit the air like a hammer. An alarm began to blare. Inside the cabin, voices rose. Questions, gasps, the clatter of seats snapping upright. Ryan froze. His eyes widened, lips trembling, words lost. Clara covered her mouth. Oh God, if he hadn't seen it. Ethan stood still, voice low and steady. It's all right. At least now we know where the problem is. Daniel turned sharply to Aaron. How bad is it? Aaron answered fast. Roughly 4% of hydraulic pressure lost. If we take off, the left wing could lose response within 2 minutes. Silence spread like a shadow through the cabin. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. Thank you, Aaron. Stop all procedures. No one moves until safety is confirmed. Aaron nodded, lifted his radio, and barked commands to the ground team. Outside, warning sirens echoed across the tarmac. Yellow light spun and reflected off the cabin glass. Inside, panic started to grow. A passenger shouted, "What's happening?" Are we safe? Ryan opened his mouth but couldn't speak. Ethan stepped forward, scanning the cabin with calm that cut through the noise. We're safe. We're just pausing to fix what should have been fixed long ago. A woman called out, "Who are you? How do you know all this?" Ethan gave a faint smile. Just a passenger. Who believes in looking closer? Daniel stood beside him, voice rough. Sir, I owe you an apology. Ethan shook his head. No need for apologies. Just action. Maya filmed Aaron through her lens as he spoke urgently into the radio. She whispered, "The world's going to see this moment." Ethan answered softly, "Then I hope they see the lesson, not just the crisis." Ryan stood frozen, fists clenched tight. He looked at Ethan, eyes glassy. "I was wrong." Ethan's reply came slowly, almost gently. "Not wrong, just blind." But luckily, the light came before it was too late. Aaron returned, breath heavy. "We've isolated the line. Repairs in 30 minutes. Ethan nodded. "Do it." The old engineer paused before leaving, meeting Ethan's eyes. "Thanks for seeing what we missed." Clara sank into her seat, hands over her face. I can't believe I laughed when you said that." Ethan rested a hand on her shoulder. "Laughing from doubt isn't the worst thing. The worst is laughing and refusing to learn." Daniel moved down the aisle, calming passengers. "It's just a technical check, folks. Complimentary drinks will be served." Ethan watched him, a faint smile touching his lips. Now they're truly serving people. Maya turned the camera toward herself, her voice trembling but clear. "Some talk about safety. Others choose to look at a wing that's bleeding." She paused. "This story isn't about a seat. It's about responsibility." Aaron returned again, sweat shining on his forehead. Pressure stable. Leak sealed. Ethan gazed out the window. See, when people face the truth together, everything can be repaired. Ryan stepped forward. "You saved me. From my own pride." Ethan shook his head gently. "No, Ryan, you saved yourself when you admitted it." A little girl near the window tugged her mother's sleeve. "Mom, who is he?" Her mother smiled softly. "The man who didn't stay silent when something was wrong." Ethan turned, catching the child's eyes. He smiled warmly. "Hello," she whispered back. "Thank you." In the cabin, hearts beat in rhythm with the quiet hum of systems shutting down. The tension faded, replaced by the heavy awareness that something precious had just been saved. A flight, a group of people, and a lesson that never grows old. Maya lowered her camera, whispering, "We just escaped death." Ethan replied gently, "No, we just came back to life." Outside, dawn light spread across the wing. The alarms went silent. No one clapped, no one cheered, only a deep, wordless calm. As everyone understood that sometimes a hero isn't the one who shouts the loudest. A hero is the one who stands up and says 4 quiet words. "Check it again, please." Clara was still trembling. Her voice cracked, trapped somewhere between guilt and breath. "If you had just switched seats from the start." Ethan looked at her, his eyes soft, sad, like the fading gold of late afternoon. Then no one would have noticed what was leaking, not just from the wing. She bowed her head, tears landing on the back of her hand. "We were so wrong." Ethan's voice was calm, almost like air itself. "Being wrong isn't the danger. The danger is when people stop looking at what's wrong." Clara looked up. "I thought you were just trying to cause trouble." Ethan smiled faintly. "No. I just wanted to prove that calmness can be stronger than any rage." Ryan stepped closer, eyes red. "If you hadn't stayed in 3A, if you'd stayed quiet like the rest of us, we'd have taken off with that leak." Ethan nodded slowly. "Yes. And maybe we would have never landed." Maya sat nearby, her screen glowing softly in the dim cabin. She whispered the caption she'd just typed. "Truth leaks louder than oil." Ethan heard it and replied gently, "Exactly. Oil burns a plane, but truth burns the conscience." Daniel Reeves returned, jacket off, his face heavy with realization. "I've been in this industry for 20 years, and I've never seen someone silence an entire crew with one sentence." Ethan smiled faintly. "It wasn't me. It was the truth. It doesn't need to shout. It only needs to stop being covered." Daniel nodded slowly, voice thick. "I always thought protecting the company's image was the priority. But maybe it's the soul we were supposed to protect." Ethan paused for a moment. "You can't teach staff how to smile if they have to bite their lips to survive." Maya looked up. "You just said what every airline needs to hear." Ethan didn't answer, only smiled quietly. Clara wiped her tears, turning to Ryan. "I laughed at him, and now he's the one who saved me." Ryan took her hand. "We can start over, if we face it." Ethan nodded softly. No one was born perfect, but everyone was born capable of better. Outside, the engineers kept working, metal tools tapped against steel, small sounds of life being restored. Ethan looked out the window. One drop of oil can expose a whole system, just like one moment of disrespect can expose an entire culture. Maya turned to him. "Do you know the video just hit 12 million views?" Ethan shrugged. "What for? If people just watch and forget." She smiled faintly. "They won't this time. They're sharing your words. Respect costs nothing." Ethan chuckled softly. "Then maybe we just bought back a little humanity." Daniel sat across from him. "You didn't just save a flight. You saved us from our own pride." Ethan's gaze deepened. "Complacency is the most dangerous leak of all. It doesn't glow. It has no smell. You only notice it when everything's already falling apart." Maya nodded, wiping her eyes. "That's the next caption." Ethan smiled. "Add one more line. If truth must choose where to appear, it always chooses the ones who dare to look." She typed it down, tears blurring her vision. Ryan stepped closer again, voice trembling. "I've worked here 12 years, and today's the first time I feel like I'm truly serving someone." Ethan nodded. "Now you understand. Service isn't pouring drinks or smiling on cue. It's protecting people from the cost of indifference." Clara pressed a hand to her chest. You made me feel ashamed, but also hopeful, Ethan replied softly. Shame is the beginning of awareness, and awareness is the beginning of change. Outside, daylight grew stronger. Sunlight brushed the wing, revealing every trace of oil being wiped clean. Maya watched it, whispering, "Now it's clear. This flight didn't stop because of a mechanical leak. It stopped so people could learn to fly with truth." Ethan smiled, nodding. Exactly. Because no flight is ever safe if the pilot isn't brave enough to check himself. Clara sat quietly, eyes shining through her tears. "Thank you for not changing seats." Ethan smiled gently. "Thank you for finally looking." Silence returned. Soft, reverent, almost sacred. A lesson that needed no announcement, only eyes willing to see. For oil may leak quietly, but truth, once it escapes, always roars louder than the engines. Daniel stood in the aisle, his hands clenching and unclenching. His voice was rough, but steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have something to say." The cabin fell completely still. Only the low hum of the air system filled the quiet air. He drew in a deep breath. "I'm the Vice President of Customer Service for this airline, and today I've witnessed how we forgot what truly matters." A woman in the front row tilted her head, eyes fixed on him. Daniel continued, "We've put procedures above dignity. We've treated membership cards as if they define human worth." His voice trembled but did not break. "I apologize, not only for what you've seen today, but for everything you've ever had to endure in silence." Ryan bowed his head. Clara wiped her tears. Maya stopped recording for a moment, gripping her phone as if afraid to break the silence. Daniel turned toward Ethan. "And especially you, Mr. Brooks. Thank you, too, for not leaving your seat, for forcing us to look at ourselves." Ethan said nothing. He only looked at him. No anger, no forgiveness. Just truth. Daniel took another breath. "I used to believe silence kept things peaceful, but now I understand. Silence just lets the wrong live longer." One person began to clap, then another, and then the entire cabin joined in. Slow, sincere, untheatrical applause. Ethan didn't move. He bowed his head slightly, accepting the apology on behalf of everyone who had ever been unseen. Daniel's next words were barely above a whisper. "We'll fix this, starting with me." Ethan answered softly, "No promises. Let your actions speak instead." Maya lifted her camera again, voice breaking as she spoke to it. "Apologies don't erase the past, but they can save the future." A man in the back asked, "Who is he?" The woman beside him whispered through tears, "The man who made an entire airline, remember. That respect has no class." Daniel looked around the cabin. "We'll remember this moment on every flight from now on. From today, equality won't depend on a seat, but on a mindset." Ryan stepped forward. "I'm sorry, too, for letting bias guide my behavior." Clara added softly, "And for forgetting that no smile is real when the heart is closed." Applause rose again, stronger this time. A little girl clapped with them, then asked her mother, "Mom, why is everyone crying and smiling at the same time?" Her mother held her close and whispered, "Because they just remembered how to be human." Ethan remained silent. He looked out of the window, where white light poured into the cabin, touching every face. There was no longer a line between passengers and crew. No more practiced smiles. Only honest eyes. Maya turned the camera back toward him. "You're not going to say anything." Ethan shook his head. "This silence is loud enough." Daniel nodded, voice cracking. "Thank you, Ethan Brooks, for stopping a flight so the world could learn how to take off the right way." Ethan smiled faintly, his words soft as wind. "There's no right way to fly without heart." The cabin fell quiet again. Sunlight hit the metal walls, scattering into countless reflections. Tiny fragments of truth piecing themselves together. A passenger whispered, "Today, I believe in people again." Ethan nodded. "We don't need to fly higher, just together." And in that silence, no one noticed Maya's camera still recording. She didn't need narration. The light was already speaking for itself. Ethan rose to his feet. No microphone, just a steady, grounded voice that carried through the entire cabin. I don't have a speech, only a story, and a lesson we've all just lived through. He looked around, faces still wet with tears, yet lit with a quiet light. People often think respect is about ethics, but in truth, it's about safety. A few passengers lifted their heads, startled. Ethan went on. When we look down on someone, we can just as easily overlook a procedure. When we disregard people, we start disregarding systems. He paused. His voice softened. And that's when the leaks begin. From complacency. A ripple of applause broke out from the middle rows. Ethan nodded slightly, letting it fade. Today, we almost took off with a wing leaking oil. Not because of a lack of skill, but because of a lack of listening. He glanced at Daniel. Then Ryan. Then Clara. I've flown across hundreds of cities. Every place has its language, its service, its smile. But there's one language everyone understands. Respect. No one moved. Ethan's next words landed like gentle chisels carving into silence. Respect is not a choice. It's the foundation of safety. The applause grew louder, then stronger, then rolled through the cabin like a rising tide. Ethan smiled faintly. He waited until the sound settled. You can call me anything you like, a customer, an inspector, or just the man in seat 3A. It doesn't matter. What matters are the people who'll sit behind us on every flight after this. At the back of the cabin, Maya gripped her phone tighter. Ethan turned toward her lens, his voice warmer now. We can't change the world with slogans, but we can start with 3 small sentences. Thank you. I'm sorry. I understand. Sometimes those 3 words are the only thing keeping the world from falling apart. A soft sigh came from the rear. An unspoken agreement. Ethan nodded. No one here was born perfect, but everyone still has the chance to make things right, as long as we're willing to look each other in the eye. He drew a long breath. I used to think my job was to manage numbers, but today I realized my real job is to protect trust. The entire cabin stood. No one told them to. The applause wasn't loud, but deep, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Ethan lifted his eyes to the white light outside. We've learned today that an airline doesn't fly on fuel alone. It flies on the honor of the people who wear its uniform. Daniel bowed his head. Ryan wiped his eyes. Clara pressed a hand to her chest and whispered, "Yes, honor." Ethan looked at them, his expression gentle. From now on, don't be afraid to stop. A delayed flight costs time, but a flight without respect loses its soul. Applause swelled again. Maya whispered through the sound, as if speaking to the entire world through her lens. He doesn't need a microphone, because every word already echoes in people's hearts. Ethan turned to her, smiling softly. I just said what everyone already knew, but forgot. He bowed his head slightly, then sat down as quietly as he had begun. No more words were needed. Everyone understood. The greatest speech isn't spoken. It's lived. The cabin remained standing, applause still rolling. The sound rose, touched the ceiling, and spread across the space, like the wings of something rediscovering how to fly after a long time on the ground. Ethan took his phone from his jacket pocket. His fingers slid gently across the screen. A faint light glowed in the cabin, reflecting off his calm face. The silver logo appeared clearly, followed by the line beneath it. Ethan Brooks, CEO, Brooks Global Investments. In a single breath, the entire cabin froze. No voices, no heavy breathing, only the quiet hiss of air slipping through the vents. Daniel stared at the screen, his mouth slightly open. My God, you. Ethan looked up. His voice was soft, yet sharp as steel, cutting through stone. Yes, I'm the man who just acquired 38% of the airline you work for. Clara stepped back, eyes wide. Ryan nearly lost his balance. You're the one who... Ethan cut him off, not to own it, but to understand it, because no report tells the truth like witnessing it firsthand. Maya stood frozen in the back row, her heart pounding so loud she could hear it in her throat. Ethan scanned the cabin face by face. I didn't come here to expose mistakes. I came to prove that respect can't be trained unless it's lived. Daniel swallowed hard. Why didn't you reveal who you were sooner? Ethan's tone stayed even, cold but steady. Because if I said I was the CEO, people would act right, but not real. He turned toward the fading sunlight outside the window. I used to believe people just needed guidance. Now I know. What they really need is to be tested. Ryan stepped forward, his voice shaking. You know, I thought I understood this job, but maybe I've only been good at following rules, not at understanding their purpose. Ethan smiled gently. Actually, you just did. Clara bit her lip, tears falling. We judged you with our eyes. If we'd known. Ethan shook his head slowly. If you'd known, you wouldn't have shown the truth. And I would never have known who you really are. Daniel bowed slightly, his voice raw. What do you want us to do? Ethan's answer came slowly, each word landing like a heartbeat. Start again, not with new policies, but with new eyes that see people as people. He turned toward Maya, a faint smile crossing his face. You recorded everything, didn't you? She nodded. Yes, every word, every moment. Ethan nodded once. Publish it, not to shame anyone, but so everyone can learn this. Power only has worth when it bows to dignity. Maya's voice trembled. Are you sure? It'll explode across the media. Ethan replied calmly. Good, because when a fire burns with truth, it doesn't destroy, it illuminates. Clara looked around the cabin. Everyone heard you, sir. Is there anything else you want to tell us? Ethan paused for a breath, then spoke slowly. Never mistake power for value. A first-class ticket says nothing about who you are, only what you paid. But how we treat each other says everything about our soul. Silence fell like a weight. No one dared to move. Daniel removed his name badge and held it in his hand. We will change, sir. Not because you own this company, but because you reminded us of what's right. Ethan smiled faintly, his face soft in the light. I don't need anyone calling me sir. Just remember this. When you see a passenger, imagine they could be your father, your sister, or me. A man in the back said quietly, You made me want to believe in this industry again. Another added, and in myself. Ethan nodded. That's enough. Because belief doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be seen. Maya turned the camera toward him. Light washed over his face. Ethan spoke his final words, calm but commanding. Respect isn't a reward. It's the condition for flight. The cabin erupted in applause. Not applause for a CEO, but for a human being. Who made the world lift its head and look at itself again? James Whitaker stared at the massive screen before him. The image of Ethan standing in the cabin filled the room, light tracing the calm lines of his face, applause rolling through hundreds of passengers. The headline beneath the broadcast froze everyone in place. Undercover CEO grounds flight to teach respect. James sat still for a few seconds, his hand resting on the cold wooden table. A young aide spoke quietly. Sir, it's on every global network. The entire industry's watching. He didn't answer. His eyes stayed fixed on Ethan's face on the screen. The voice echoed again through the speakers. Respect is not a reward. It's the condition for flight. James closed his eyes as if each word had pierced the air and lodged deep in his mind. When he opened them, his voice dropped low. Ground every plane. The aide froze. Sir, you mean the entire fleet? James nodded once. All of them. Every flight. Immediately. A wave of panic swept across the room. Phones rang. Alarms blinked red. Sir, the aide stammered, we'll lose billions and be torn apart in the press. James met her eyes. Steady, sharp, unshaken. And if we don't, we'll lose our souls. Silence fell so heavy, it seemed to bend the air. James stood walking toward the glass wall overlooking the runway. Dozens of planes idled, engines humming, lights blinking like the heartbeat of an entire industry. He whispered, Stop, so the world can learn how to take off the right way. 1 minute later, an emergency message flashed across every airport network. All flights are temporarily grounded pending internal review. Social media erupted. Hashtags flooded in. Through Seat 3A effect. Respect eyes operational. Ground for change. All over the world, passengers looked up at departure boards glowing in red. Delayed. Internal audit in progress. No one knew why, until someone reposted the video of Ethan. One person, then thousands, then millions. Western news outlets called it the flight that grounded humanity. A European network wrote, "For the first time in aviation history, respect is treated as a safety requirement." In India, the flight attendant posted, "Today, I wasn't asked to smile pretty, I was asked to listen." At headquarters, James entered the emergency boardroom, all eyes locked on him. One executive protested, "We're committing corporate suicide. Stocks are already down 7% in 2 hours." James replied softly, "How many percent of trust have we lost in the past 10 years? Another muttered, "Is this going to be some PR stunt?" James shook his head. "No, this is repentance. We've talked about safety, service, but never about dignity." Ethan appeared on the conference screen, live from the airport. His voice was calm as always. "I heard you grounded every flight." James nodded. "Because you were right. We can't fly until we learn how to treat people." Ethan smiled faintly. "That wasn't an easy call," James answered. "No, but the right call rarely is." Maya watched the breaking news from the old cabin, tears streaming down her face. Not from fear, but because for the first time, kindness was spreading faster than scandal. Clara stood by the terminal window, looking out at rows of silent aircraft. She whispered, "The whole world just stopped because one man refused to leave his seat." Ryan nodded, and this time, stopping is the right move. James turned to his executive team. "Send a global memo. We're launching a new training program. Its name will be the Brooks Protocol." A manager asked softly, "Why Brooks?" James looked back at the screen, where Ethan's face flickered through static. "Because he reminded me that in every industry, the one thing that must never be automated is humanity." Outside, rain began to fall. Drops hit the glass, blending with the sound of engines going silent. Ethan looked up at the silver-gray sky. He spoke quietly into the phone to Maya. They stopped, because finally they started to listen. Maya's voice trembled with hope. "And the world is breathing again." Across global flight boards, a new message appeared beneath every schedule. "Delayed for humanity." No one complained, no one shouted, because in that moment, humanity understood something simple. Sometimes, to fly higher, you first have to stop. On the ground. Two screens lit up on opposite sides of the world. One showed the glowing towers of Brooks Global against the night. The other, the control hub of the airline, its panels flashing red, blue, and amber like a nervous pulse. At the top floor of Brooks Global, Diana Foster stood in the middle of a silent boardroom, eyes locked on the live broadcast. Her voice was low, but steady. "He's not testing people. He's testing the system itself." The man beside her frowned. "What do you mean?" Diana didn't look away from the screen. "Ethan's not trying to expose a mistake. He's trying to see what happens when conscience collides with procedure." On the screen, James Whitaker was still speaking to the press. "All flights will remain grounded until we learn how to respect one another again." No one in the Brooks Global room moved. You could hear the ticking of a wristwatch. A market analyst exhaled sharply. "He's throwing the economy into chaos. Stocks will crash," Diana replied softly. "Sometimes, stocks have to fall for values to rise." Across the ocean. Inside the airline's command center, James watched the same feed. He saw himself on screen, with comment threads exploding beneath his image. "Ground for change." "Respect's operational." "Brooks effect," he said quietly to his aide. "Do you know what's truly frightening?" She shook her head. "That a story built on truth spreads faster than the stories we've been selling." Back in New York, Diana looked out through the glass. Rain streaked down the window, splitting the city lights into rivers of silver. He knows exactly how to make the system hold itself accountable, not through force, but through a public mirror. A director asked, You think he planned all of this? Diana nodded slowly. He always plans, but never to destroy, only to awaken. The younger man nearby hesitated. Aren't you afraid? She smiled faintly, sadness behind it. I am, but I'm more afraid of living in a world that mistakes politeness for respect. Across the world, James gathered his senior managers on a massive video call. Dozens of faces filled the wall of screens. His tone was calm, deliberate. We're not being defeated by the media. We're being confronted by the truth. And it's time we rise from it. Diana replayed the cabin footage on her tablet. Ethan's voice came through, quiet but unshakable. Respect isn't a reward. It's the condition for flight. She whispered. He just redefined the word professionalism. An assistant asked, Do you think people will follow? Diana replied, No one can resist what's right, when it's spoken with courage. At that exact moment, James said nearly the same words. We'll rebuild everything, from the cockpit to the ticket counter, not to look good on camera, but to be worthy in the eyes of those who fly. 2 continents apart, 2 leaders speaking the same language of awakening. Diana glanced at her reflection in the dim glass. He won, not with power, but with integrity. Her colleague asked, So what will you do? She answered softly, The only thing that makes sense. Learn how to lead without hiding. Meanwhile, James stood before the long window overlooking the grounded fleet. Dozens of planes lay silent under the rain. He whispered, We'll take off again. But this time, with the truth. And somewhere between those 2 headquarters, Ethan scrolled through the news on his phone. His smile was small, but bright enough to light the screen. He murmured, Finally, they've started listening to each other. A message popped up from Maya. They're calling it the ripple effect. Ethan typed back, No. It's what happens when people remember how to be human. On radar screens across the globe, hundreds of bright dots froze at once. Flight paths that once crisscrossed like glowing webs were suddenly still, as if the sky itself had stopped to breathe. A slow voiceover carried through the airwaves. The sky paused to listen. From Tokyo to New York, from Paris to Johannesburg, every signal now reads "Stand by." Not because of a system failure, but because one sentence had reached the heart of an entire industry. In Frankfurt, an air traffic controller stared at the motionless radar and whispered, I've never seen anything like this. The sky looks calm. In Dubai, a pilot spoke into his radio. We're waiting for clearance, but maybe this is the best order I've ever received. At Atlanta International, thousands of passengers sat quietly. No shouting, no complaints. Just faces turned toward the windows, where rows of aircraft stood still beneath pale sunlight. A small boy asked his mother, Mom, why aren't they flying? She smiled softly. Because they're learning how to fly better. News anchors across the world delivered breaking updates. All international flights suspended for moral and operational review. One journalist said, live on air, there's no precedent for this. No one's ever been brave enough to do it. In the Global Command Center, James Whitaker stood before a massive flight map. Light from the screens shimmered on his face. His eyes were wet. Someone asked, Sir, should we start resuming flights? James shook his head. No, the sky's been noisy too long. It needs a moment of silence. Across the ocean, Diana Foster watched from her office. She smiled faintly as she saw hundreds of aircraft icons stop in unison. We just proved that trust alone can bring the world to a halt. On social media, millions of people posted the same words. The sky paused to listen. Photos flooded in. Jets lined up under sunlight, grounded yet radiant. A pilot wrote, For the first time, I saw how beautiful the ground looks from the cockpit. An old engineer in Singapore messaged his team, Today, we're not fixing machines. We're fixing ourselves. In a quiet airport lounge, Ethan Brooks sat before a cup of cold coffee and a phone that wouldn't stop buzzing. Maya's text appeared. You see it. The whole world's on pause. Ethan replied, They're not pausing. They're finally starting to listen. At the terminal gates, Ryan and Clara watched the still line of planes outside. Clara whispered, I never thought one drop of oil could stop the world. Ryan nodded. Maybe sometimes something has to leak before we can fix the system. Ethan lifted his cup, Eyes distant, the sky never goes completely silent. It just takes a day like this to relearn the sound of humanity. On live television, a trembling host announced, "We are witnessing something unprecedented. The global aviation industry has stopped. Not for war, not for crisis, but for conscience." A retired flight attendant from Toronto commented beneath the viral video, "I left this job years ago after being humiliated over a service mistake. Now I'm crying because they finally stopped to learn respect." Maya scrolled through thousands of comments streaming across her screen. She whispered, "This isn't just one airline story anymore. It's humanity's." At headquarters, James faced the silent map and gave one final order. "Send this message everywhere. We will not take off again until every employee understands that safety and dignity are the same." Around the world, aircraft remained still, each one seeming to bow. Ethan spoke softly. "The sky may stretch endlessly upward, but it's human worth that gives it depth." And in that moment, everyone felt it. The world hadn't really stopped. It was simply listening to itself again through one man who refused to rise from Seat 3A. Seat 3A took the #1 spot across every platform, every headline, every feed, every screen replayed the same image. A man sitting quietly in first class, light resting on his calm face like sunlight on still water before a storm. Because sometimes silence learns to fly. Social media exploded as if the world had just found a mirror of itself. Messages, posts, and hashtags flooded every timeline. He didn't raise his voice. He raised the standard. Calm is not weakness. It's control. Respect took off today. Outside the airline's headquarters, reporters pressed microphones against the glass doors. "Can you confirm every flight has been canceled? Do you believe the CEO disguised himself to stage this? Was this just a marketing stunt?" James Whitaker stood before the sea of cameras, voice steady, words deliberate. "No, he did it so we could see ourselves again. A brand can survive losing money, but if it loses dignity, it's nothing." Cameras flashed in a frenzy. One journalist shouted, "What do you call what happened today?" James replied softly, "A lesson in midair." Across the country, Diana Foster watched the broadcast from her conference room. A reporter read the line on screen. "Hertzger's Seat 3A has become a movement of conscience." Diana whispered to herself. One man sat still, and the whole world began to move. Ethan Brooks scrolled through the news in silence. No pride, no triumph, just a quiet smile that softened the light in his eyes. Maya called, her voice trembling. "Do you see this? They're calling you the Quiet Revolution." Ethan answered gently, "I didn't start a revolution. I just stopped, long enough for them to hear the silence they created." Television reran the cabin footage. That moment when Ethan said, "Respect isn't optional, it's operational safety." Viewers everywhere shared it again and again. One comment stood out. "That line should be written on every boarding gate." At airports around the world, passengers began to applaud quietly whenever a pilot or flight attendant walked past. Not out of idolization, but out of recognition that they too were relearning humanity's oldest lesson. An international journalist interviewed Ethan. "Did you anticipate this kind of reaction?" He shook his head. "No. The truth doesn't need prediction. It spreads like air." What made people connect so deeply? Because everyone, at least once in life, has been diminished. And everyone hopes someone will finally stand up. Or sit still, the right way. Silence, placed in the right hands. Echoes louder than any shout. A major network aired a special report. The man who grounded an empire without raising his voice. Ethan watched, shaking his head slightly. Not an empire, just walls. And when walls fall, the light finds its way in. Maya smiled through the video call. "You know what? Kids are playing Seat 3A at school now. One pretends to be the passenger, one the flight attendant. When they're told to move, the passenger just says, 'Respect costs nothing.'" Ethan laughed softly, eyes glistening. "Then we're already flying. In a different way." Outside, the sky stayed still, but inside people's hearts, millions of wings opened. not powered by engines, but by awareness. Sometimes, the only thing needed to change the world is one person calm enough to stop being silent. Ethan looked out the window. The last light of the sun touched the row of silver wings, then faded. No engines, no announcements, only stillness. Stretching wide like a lake that had finally stopped trembling, he whispered, "Sometimes, peace sounds like consequence." Maya sat across from him, both hands around a cold cup of coffee. "Do you regret it?" Ethan smiled softly. "If it costs noise to regain dignity, then no." She nodded, eyes lowered. "The whole world is quiet because of you," he answered gently. "Not because of me, because they realized they'd been silent for too long." Outside, planes lined the runway like sleeping giants. Hundreds of passengers stood by the glass, watching, not rushing. A little boy tugged at his father's sleeve. "Dad, is the sky broken?" The father bent down, smiling. "No, son. It's just resting." In the terminal, the light from a TV screen washed over faces watching the same image. Ethan Brooks, the man who made the world stop to learn how to listen. A reporter's voice carried through the speakers. For the first time, silence isn't surrender. It's leadership. Ethan gazed at the copper horizon. It's strange, isn't it? How people only understand silence when the noise becomes unbearable. Maya replied softly, "Because silence forces us to hear ourselves." A message appeared on his phone from James Whitaker. "We're preparing to take off again, but differently this time." Ethan typed slowly. "Don't rush. Let the sky remember this lesson a little longer." He set the phone down, eyes drifting toward the edge of daylight, where the last traces of sun were fading like the breath of a tired world. "I used to think strength was making people hear me. Now I know. Real strength is making them want to hear each other." Maya stayed quiet. After a moment, she whispered, "Do you know what made me cry the most?" Ethan turned. "When the cabin applauded," she shook her head. "When you said nothing. That silence was louder than any speech." He smiled faintly, voice deep and calm. "Because sometimes silence isn't retreat. It's the only way to give someone else a chance to speak the truth." On the TV, the evening news rolled on. C3A remains the top trend for the third consecutive day. The anchor spoke over a montage of faces. This story is no longer about aviation. It's about humanity and our ability to see each other again after so much blindness. Ethan stood, walking toward the glass wall. The blue light outside reflected across his face. Behind him, Maya asked quietly, "What will you do next?" He replied without turning, "Listen a little longer." She smiled through her trembling voice. "Listen to what?" "To how the world breathes when it finally stops shouting." Beyond the glass, the planes remained still. Runway lights blinked gently, steady as a heartbeat, finding its rhythm again. Somewhere online, a passenger posted, "I'm sitting in an airport. No one's flying, no one's angry, just a strange kind of peace." Ethan murmured, "There's no such thing as a wasted flight if it teaches someone how to land in another person's heart." Maya watched him for a long time. "Do you think the world will forget?" "Maybe. But at least today, they heard." He turned, the faintest smile crossing his face, light as the last breath of dusk. "And that's all I ever needed." The sky outside fell completely dark. No applause, no broadcasts, only silence. The rarest sound the world had finally remembered how to treasure. The boardroom was silent. A long table stretched between Ethan and the line of executives facing him. No cameras, no audience, only air thick with unease. He placed a folder on the table. 4 bold words were printed across the cover: "The Dignity Protocol." Ethan looked around the room. Not with accusation, but invitation. "I'm not here to criticize. I'm here to propose a better way to work." An executive in glasses smirked. "You plan to teach us how to run an airline?" Ethan's tone stayed calm. "No. I plan to remind everyone why we built one in the first place." Another voice cut in. "Do you have any idea how much it costs to ground the entire fleet?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, around $2 billion. But I also know the worth of an industry can't be measured in money. Silence spread through the room. He opened the folder, turning each page slowly. These are the new directives. Every employee will be retrained, not to serve better, but to see better. Someone interrupted. Is this a PR strategy? Ethan answered immediately. No, it's a survival strategy. A man crossed his arms. So you're threatening us? Ethan met his gaze. I'm reminding you. The words landed heavily. He continued, voice low but clear. We can keep flying with perfect engines, but sooner or later we'll crash if the people in the cockpit lose direction. A few executives looked down. Ethan nodded slightly. I once heard a saying in a control room, check every system before you fly. But no one ever checks the most important system, human dignity. James Whitaker leaned back, eyes narrowing. You want to turn an airline into a morality school? Ethan replied, no. I want to turn it into a place where people don't have to be afraid of being human. The head of marketing spoke up. You realize the media will devour this, right? Ethan smiled faintly. Let them. I'd rather be criticized for doing what's right than praised for pretending. The door opened. Diana Foster stepped in unexpectedly. She set her phone on the table and played the cabin video. C3A. Ethan's voice filled the room. Respect isn't optional, it's operational safety. No one could look up. Diana spoke softly. I used to think you did it for attention, but you did it to make us listen. Ethan nodded. I'm not asking for apologies. I'm asking for change. An executive stood abruptly. You don't understand shareholder pressure. Ethan's smile faded. I understand the pressure of conscience more. It doesn't show up in quarterly reports, but it's the only thing that lets you sleep. The room froze. Ethan turned to the final page and laid it open in the center. Here's the choice. We rebuild with trust, or keep patching with apologies. James inhaled deeply. And if we refuse, Ethan's voice stayed even. Then I'll make everything public. Not to shame you, but to free you. A system only heals when it dares to see its own wounds. Diana's eyes cut through the room. I agree. It's time to turn words into standards. Someone whispered, we'll lose control if we follow him. Ethan turned to him. Control isn't lost when we trust people. It's lost when we stop trusting ourselves. The air grew dense again. Then James stood, pressing his hand softly to the table. All right, we'll try it. Not for the press, not for investors, but because, for once, I want to believe this industry can be better. Ethan nodded. Then start now. Not with a campaign, but with one decent decision at a time. He gathered the documents, his voice quiet but firm. This isn't a plan to save an airline. It's a map to help people find their way back to humanity. No one spoke. The silence that followed was no longer born of fear, but of awakening. Ethan closed the folder, turned toward the door, and said softly, flying higher never means looking down on others. Ethan laid the final page on the table. 3 short lines, bold, plain, unmistakable, transparent cameras, mandatory training, public reports. He looked straight across the table. That's the condition. The CFO frowned. You're proposing we install internal cameras across the entire airline? Ethan nodded. Not for control, for truth. No more word against word, just evidence and accountability. Another executive leaned forward. You think that'll make employees trust us more? Ethan replied softly. They'll trust when they know justice doesn't depend on rank. A sigh drifted from the corner. A woman murmured, this will cost people their seats. Ethan's tone stayed calm. Seats don't matter. It's the posture you take in them that does. The room fell silent again. Diana flipped through the document quickly, then looked up. Mandatory training. For everyone? Including leadership? Ethan nodded once. Especially leadership. They're the mirror. If the mirror's dirty, every reflection bends. The PR director spoke next. Do you realize public reports will terrify shareholders? Ethan's eyes stayed steady. Shareholders deserve to know what their investment stands for. Money can't fly, but dignity can. James Whittaker leaned back in his chair, thinking. How long for approval? Ethan answered, 24 hours. A few nervous laughs broke the tension. One man scoffed. You're speaking like someone with authority. Ethan's gaze didn't waver. I'm not giving orders. I'm drawing a line. If you don't approve, I'll release every document and recording from Flight 3A. The room froze solid. A voice whispered, You'll destroy the industry. Ethan replied instantly, No, I'll save it. Diana closed the folder gently. I'm in. Transparency never killed anyone. It only kills the habit of lying. Another man protested. We can't turn everything into cameras and audits. We need trust. Ethan turned to him. Trust isn't born, it's built. With proof. He stepped forward, voice steady. I don't want an airline that's only safe in engineering. I want one safe in conduct. Because a pilot can save a plane, but only integrity can save a brand. James nodded slowly. Cameras, training, reports. If we do this, it has to be real. Ethan met his eyes. Not just real, lived. Every video, every report, every hour of training, each one is a promise to those who trust us. One executive asked quietly, If we agree, will you withdraw from the controlling stake? Ethan shook his head. No, I'll stay. Not to manage, to protect the value. Diana looked around the room, voice firm. I support it. If this works, we'll be the first airline in the world with a dignity index. Someone blinked. Dignity index, she explained. A measure of how people treat one another, not just how they hit KPIs. Ethan nodded. Exactly. One day, passengers won't choose an airline for price or meals. They'll choose it for how they're treated when they step on board. James glanced at his watch, then rose from his chair. 24 hours. This isn't a deadline. It's a chance. Ethan smiled faintly. If you understand that, the airline's already airborne again. No one spoke. The soft rustle of paper sounded like wings catching wind. On the cover, 3 clear lines remained. Transparent cameras, mandatory training, public reports. Ethan reached the door, his voice echoing back. 24 hours to approve, because respect can't wait any longer. The boardroom remained still. Afternoon light slid across the glass table, reflecting faces that had been wrestling with themselves. James Whittaker sat motionless, his fingers interlaced, eyes fixed on the agreement lying in front of him. No one dared breathe too loudly. Time itself seemed to hold its breath. Ethan stood without speaking. He didn't push. He waited. Sometimes, truth needs silence more than debate. James exhaled slowly. I've read every line. His voice was low, dry, but no longer defensive. Transparent cameras, mandatory training, public reports. He looked around the room. I used to think these things would make us look weak in front of shareholders, but maybe they'll make us stronger in front of humanity. The CFO's tone was sharp. If this fails, the stock will drop like a stone. James answered quietly. If we keep hiding mistakes, trust will fall forever. Another voice added, We're agreeing to live under the global lens. James turned to him, a faint smile crossing his face. Good. We've been hiding in the dark long enough. He turned to Ethan. We accept. The words were short, but they sounded like a release. The whole room seemed to breathe out together, shedding a weight too heavy to name. Sunlight fell across the table, scattering into a pale silver streak. No applause, no cheers, just truth, finally audible. Ethan nodded. Thank you. He opened the file again, signed the final page. From this moment on, every flight will check more than engines. It will check how we treat people. Diana looked at him, her eyes full of fatigue and belief. You know, some revolutions start with an explosion. This one started with a breath. Ethan smiled softly, because sometimes silence is loud enough. James rose from his seat, voice steady. I've been in this industry for 30 years. We've flown fast, flown far. But today, for the first time, I feel we're flying right. Ethan replied, No one controls the wind, but everyone controls how they raise their wings. A young executive stood up, his voice shaking. I want to join the first Dignity Protocol team. Then another, and another. The entire left row nodded in unison. James looked at them and, for the first time in years, truly smiled. Then let's begin, not with speeches, but with action. Ethan nodded. Remember, every small decision is a flight. Don't let it crash just because we forget why it took off. Someone asked quietly, "And you? What will you do next?" Ethan glanced out the window where the last rays of sunlight fell across silent wings. "I'll observe, the way the sky does. Not to control, to witness." James stepped forward and offered his hand. "Today, you didn't just save an airline, you saved the way we look at each other." Ethan shook his hand. Their eyes met. No words needed. Diana's smile trembled. Finally, someone made trust feel reasonable again. Ethan's voice softened. "There's nothing more reasonable than the truth." The room stayed silent a little longer. Then James spoke quietly. "We'll announce it tomorrow morning." Ethan nodded. "Then the world will see. Light doesn't need to be blind to reveal. It just needs to shine enough for us to see ourselves." James smiled faintly. "Do you think they'll believe us?" Ethan replied, "Belief isn't given, it's felt." The sunlight caught the fresh ink on the signatures, glowing faintly. A single drop from a nearby glass spread into ripples across the table, like the first wave of an ocean waking up. Ethan whispered, "Respect has been signed." No one answered, only silence remained. But this silence no longer meant fear. It was the beginning of peace. Ryan received his suspension letter the next morning. No one read it aloud, no one took a photo. Just a thin white sheet, a few cold lines, enough to close a chapter. He sat still for a long time, eyes fixed on his name printed at the top. No anger, no defense, only emptiness. The word "sir," once spoken out of reflex, now echoed back in his head. Dry as metal. Outside, the cabin lights were on. People were retraining, their voices softer, their smiles real. The greetings sounded genuine again. The eyes no longer turned away. Ryan looked into the mirror. The uniform still fit, perfectly pressed, yet meaningless. He remembered the moment he told Ethan to move. That calm smile haunted him still. It wasn't defiance. It was a mirror. He whispered to his reflection, "I should have just asked one more question, only one, to prove he was still human." At that same hour, Logan Pierce entered the boardroom of Grant Enterprises. 3 executives waited inside. No greeting, only sharp, cold eyes. The chairman read the statement slowly. "You are hereby relieved of all duties effective immediately." Logan gave a dry laugh. "For a seat on a plane?" The man replied, "For an ego too big to fit in any seat." Logan went silent. No protest. He simply looked out the window. Above the skyline, an Airlux jet took off. The sound was small, but clear. A part of him lifted away with it. Back at the airport, Ryan walked down the corridor. No one looked up. He placed his badge on the security desk, said nothing. The glass door closed behind him. The soft click sounded like the end of a sentence. Ethan didn't appear. He didn't have to. The truth had already finished its work. Ryan stepped outside. The wind brushed past his hair. Cool, but heavy. From the intercom came a voice. "Flight 422. Boarding complete." He stopped. Eyes closed. That was the flight number he once served with pride. He used to think he knew everything about it. Now he understood. It never mattered who sat where, only how you faced the person beside you. Logan exited the building. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing like lightning. He said nothing, walking straight through. A voice shouted, "Do you regret it?" He turned slightly, pride gone from his face. "For the first time in my life, yes." The word spread online within minutes. No outrage, no defense, just quiet. A silence that sounded like acceptance. Ryan sat alone in a cafe near the airport. On the wall-mounted screen, the news showed Ethan signing the Dignity Protocol. The headline read, "Respect takes flight." Ryan smiled faintly. No bitterness, just understanding. Everything had begun with a smile he once dismissed. Now he was learning to smile again, and mean it. A cup of coffee cooled beside him. The old self dissolved slowly, leaving only what was real. No music, no drum roll, just a soft breath in the quiet morning. and within it, a confession that didn't need words. A week after the airline announced the dignity protocol, Maya Lopez was summoned to the top floor meeting room. No one told her why, only a printed invitation with her name and a single line at the bottom. Transformation Division. She stepped inside. The faces that once intimidated her were already there. Dark suits, sharp eyes that used to make her lower her gaze, but today she didn't. She had seen something greater than fear. James Whitaker smiled, his voice warmer than she remembered. Maya Lopez, we have a position that needs a leader. She hesitated. I'm just the one who filmed the video, not someone who leads. Ethan, standing beside him, met her eyes gently. That's exactly why you should. Silence settled over the room. Maya looked around at the curious, cautious faces. She took a breath. I only did what was right, not to prove anything, just to stop being silent. Ethan nodded slowly, and that's where every real change begins. He placed a folder on the table. Director of Transformation, you'll lead the training programs, collect feedback, and help remind the system what humanity sounds like. Maya froze. She remembered the moment her fingers trembled pressing record, heart racing, afraid she'd done something wrong. Now that same moment had opened a door to something bigger. You trust me, she whispered. Ethan smiled. I trust anyone who can turn discomfort into courage. Her voice cracked softly. I never thought a video could change an entire industry. Ethan replied, it wasn't the video, it was the heart behind the lens. Diana stepped forward, her tone firm but kind. We need people like you, not afraid of the light, but not chasing it either. Maya smiled faintly. So, where do I start? Ethan's gaze drifted to the window, where everyone once looked away. The room went quiet again, because they all understood. Change doesn't begin in boardrooms. It begins in hallways, at check-in counters, in moments when people finally see each other. James picked up his pen and signed the papers. The scratch of ink against paper sounded like the final note of an old song. Maya Lopez, Director of Transformation. Her eyes shimmered. Thank you for not forgetting the smallest person in this story. Ethan shook his head. No one is small when they dare to stand tall. The meeting ended. Maya stepped out holding the document that still smelled of ink. She paused by the glass corridor. Outside, planes prepared for takeoff, sunlight stretching in silver lines across their wings. She smiled quietly. Maybe I'm taking off too. Behind her, Ethan watched, his expression calm and proud. Discomfort turned into courage, and courage turned into change. Maya turned, her smile bright. I didn't change them. They made me believe people can be better. Ethan nodded. And that is the most valuable thing an airline can ever carry. They stood side by side in silence, watching the planes rise into the morning light. No words left to say, because they both knew the greatest flight that day didn't leave from the runway. It took off from the human heart. Ryan stood at the end of the training hall, quietly watching the first class of the Dignity Protocol program. New faces, new voices. None of them is familiar. He no longer wore a uniform, just a plain shirt, a worn folder in his hand, its edges frayed like an old chapter still clinging on. Ethan walked up beside him. He didn't speak at first. He simply stopped there, standing with him, both looking toward the classroom ahead. Inside, Maya was speaking, her tone calm and steady, each word stitching back the torn fabric of a system that had forgotten how to feel. Ryan whispered, I used to believe I was doing the right thing. Those rules kept everything in order, but I didn't see that I'd turned order into walls. Ethan looked at him, not with judgment, but understanding. You weren't blind. You just didn't know what light looked like yet. Ryan smiled faintly. Now I do. Light isn't what comes from the ceiling. It's what comes from how people treat each other. He took a deep breath, his voice low. I'm not asking to get my position back. I just want to help teach what I once got wrong. Ethan nodded slowly. Then start there. Teach them how to say sir without turning it into a blade. Teach them that politeness doesn't mean distance. Ryan paused. His throat tightened. I never thought I'd thank the man who made me lose my job. Ethan smiled gently. You didn't lose a job. You were given back the chance to do real work, the work of being human. Ryan looked toward the classroom. Maya turned, catching his gaze, a warm light reflecting in her eyes. He whispered, "It feels like I'm flying again, even without wings." Ethan's voice softened. "Then look closely and teach those who still can't see." Ryan nodded. "I won't teach with words. I'll teach with my eyes." Ethan rested a hand on his shoulder. "See first, then teach. There's no redemption greater than guiding others out of the same darkness you once stood in." Ryan lowered his head, voice trembling. "Thank you for not writing me out of the story." Ethan answered, "No one's written out as long as they still want to rewrite their part." They stood in silence. Up front, Maya ended the session with a single line. "Respect doesn't begin when we bow our heads, but when we lift them and truly see each other." Ryan closed his eyes, repeating softly, "I was blind. Now I see." Ethan said quietly, "Then take that light and shine it where it's darkest." A cool blue glow reflected across both their faces, spreading through the glass wall ahead. No shadow could swallow them anymore, only people, and the light they had finally learned to see. In the first days of the training program, its reach spread across the world. From New York to Tokyo, from Johannesburg to London, every airport began the same lesson. Not a lesson about procedures, but a lesson about people. A young flight attendant practiced looking passengers in the eye and greeting them without a script. An older pilot leaned in to listen to a disabled passenger's story, then nodded as if learning something new. The sound of training echoed through the halls. Equity drill, round 1. Greet by name, not by seat. They repeated it, faces still unsure, voices slowly warming. An instructor read the line written on the board. Respect isn't a task, it's a habit. The room fell silent, then pens began to move across notebooks. At every training center, new posters went up. A silver wing on a blue background, and beneath it, a simple phrase glowing bright, "Respect flies first." Ethan stood in the central command room, watching the giant wall of screens. Each frame showed a training team in a different country. Each frame showed people learning, again, how to listen. Diana Foster walked in, holding a report. Teams in Europe have finished their first round. 98% positive response rate. Ethan smiled softly. Percentages don't matter. What matters is they're being real. Diana nodded. We used to teach them how to take off on time. Now we're teaching them how to land with grace. A message came in from Maya in Singapore, a photo of her standing before a class, smiling brightly. Ethan, they understand now. When we teach them respect, they start believing in themselves. Ethan read it, then looked up at the wall in front of him. The new logo had been lit the night before. 2 wings, 1 white, 1 silver, meeting in the middle. Beneath it, the same words glowed clear. Respect flies first. He placed his hand on the emblem and murmured, "No, flight is truly safe if people are still afraid of each other." In Rio, a group of attendants practiced the silence recognition exercise. They sat quietly listening to each other's breathing, then described what they felt. One woman began to cry. "I've never had anyone listen to me for that long." The room fell still, and in that silence, everyone understood. Fairness wasn't a policy. It was warmth, returning after years of coldness. Across the network, a voice message from James Whitaker played in every hall. "From this day forward, we don't just serve flights, we serve trust." Applause broke out, rolling through training centers around the world. Not because of command, but because of pride. Real, human pride, something the skies had long forgotten. Ethan looked once more at the screens. Faces, smiles, small gestures. He whispered to himself, "This is how the world learns to fly again. Not with engines, but with respect." Outside, the evening sky burned orange. A plane took off, the new logo gleaming along its side. The sunlight caught on the metal skin, and the words shone across the open sky. Respect flies first. 3 months after the training program began, the new system went live. Daniel Reeves stood before the massive screen, his voice calm yet resolute. From now on, every passenger can submit feedback anonymously. No account, no name, just the truth. The room fell silent. On the screen, a blue pulse appeared. Then a line of text formed slowly. Human Feedback Network, because every voice counts. Daniel continued, "This system will record every experience, every thank you, every complaint. But more than that, it will record emotion. No more fear of retaliation. No more being ignored." Ethan sat in the front row, hands clasped. He wasn't watching the screen. He was watching the faces around him. For the first time, he saw belief instead of defense. They looked like people who finally trusted something real. A young employee raised his hand. "What if someone lies in the system?" Daniel smiled softly. "Then the truth of the many will filter out the noise. We don't need to control voices. We just need to learn how to listen." Ethan nodded. "Listening isn't for reacting. It's for understanding." Diana added, her tone firm and clear, because when people feel heard, they start hearing others too. On the screen, the first data wave moved. A message box lit up. The very first message in the global system appeared. "Thank you for listening." 4 simple words. And everyone stood up. No applause, no cheer, just silence. Reverent, like a prayer finally answered. Maya whispered, "It's not thank you for flying anymore. It's thank you for listening." Ethan replied quietly, "Because flying is the job of machines. Listening is the work of human beings." Daniel looked down at the monitor. A passenger in Seattle sent that message. She said she was ignored at a ticket counter for 2 hours. And today, she felt seen for the first time. Ethan smiled gently. 4 words. And yet they moved an entire system. A maintenance worker looked up at the glowing screen, eyes wide. "Maybe this is the first time the airline ever said thank you back." Ethan turned to him, voice warm. "Saying thank you back is how we remember why we exist in the first place." Daniel typed a command. The system sent its first automated response. "We heard you, and we will keep listening." The words appeared. Simple, honest, and enough. People looked at one another and nodded. No more thick reports, no empty slogans, just a system that knew how to bow to humanity. Ethan rose from his chair, the blue light from the screen reflecting in his eyes. Sometimes change doesn't begin with grand apologies. It begins with one small, genuine sentence. Maya smiled softly. "Thank you for listening." Ethan nodded. "And we will never stop." On the screen, those words kept glowing, like a promise sent into the sky. Quiet, but never lost in transmission. An elderly woman forgot her wallet at the check-in counter. The man behind her bent down, picked it up, and returned it with both hands. No one recorded it. No one told the story. But their smiles told it anyway. A little boy dropped his toy inside the cabin. A flight attendant knelt down, picked it up, wiped it clean, and placed it back into his hands, as if giving back treasure. The passenger beside them saw it and gently patted her shoulder. A disabled man struggled with his suitcase at the aircraft door. 2 technicians stopped what they were doing and rushed to help. No thank you was needed, just an exchange of glances filled with quiet understanding. A young businesswoman, once tense, smiled softly as she received her delayed meal. The attendant whispered, "We don't just serve food, we serve respect." The woman nodded, her eyes calming. A flight from Seoul landed through heavy rain. Passengers lingered, helping one another with luggage, holding jackets over strangers' heads. No more rushing voices, only warm, honest ones. A group of young travelers recorded a video for the airline hotline. Their voices played through the short clip. "We saw real smiles. We felt safe. Not just because of the engines." Ethan watched the video from his office. He said nothing. He just listened. An employee entered quietly. "What do you think of all this change, sir?" Ethan replied, his tone low and steady. "Change doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to reach far enough." An internal report scrolled across the screen, short feedback lines glowing one after another. "Thank you for being kind. You made my mother smile again. This flight felt human. Daniel read them aloud, eyes glimmering. Strange. Each line lasts less than a second, yet it changes the rhythm of the heart. Maya stepped closer, her voice gentle but firm. Sometimes we don't need miracles. We just need someone brave enough to be kind first. Diana nodded. Kindness spreads faster than any network, and once it begins, no system can stop it. On the global map, tiny lights blinked across continents. Each light represented a single moment captured by the new feedback system. A passenger helping another lift a bag. An employee smiled just when someone was about to give up. A silent thank you exchanged through eyes alone. Ethan's voice rose quietly over the hum of the room. Change doesn't travel at the speed of airplanes. It travels at the speed of kindness. Outside, morning light reflected off the moving aircraft. The new logo shimmered in the sun. Respect flies first. Maya looked out the window, her gaze stretching toward the endless sky. We can't make someone good instantly, but we can make them believe. That goodness is real. Ethan smiled softly, and once that belief takes off, it never lands. Familiar sounds filled the air. Luggage wheels, greetings, children laughing. No longer noise, just the heartbeat of a world learning to be kind again. The narration faded. Change travels at the speed of kindness, and for the first time, the audience didn't just hear a story. They felt it, continuing quietly, even after it ended. A gentle morning light covered the central plaza. No engine noise, only soft voices of people gathering. Hundreds stood together, pilots, crew, former passengers, new travelers, all facing the glass building bearing the new emblem. On the tall wall behind the stage, the words glowed clear. Dignity and Aviation Foundation. Below it, two interwoven wings, one white, one black, merged like a vow that needed no words. Ethan stepped forward. No suit, just a simple shirt. His voice was steady, calm, and warm. Today, we're not launching an organization. We're launching a commitment. A promise that no one needs to be perfect to deserve respect. Diana stood beside him, her eyes bright. We've learned that if respect only belongs to those who look like us, then it's no longer respect. Maya looked across the crowd, faces of passengers, employees, people who had once apologized, and those who had forgiven. She smiled softly. This isn't an airline anymore. It's a landing place for humanity. James Whitaker placed his hand on the engraved stone logo, his voice low. I once believed technology could save everything. Now I know. Only dignity can preserve what we build. Ethan continued, his tone slow and deep. This foundation will support every airline that wants to transform its culture. It will fund scholarships for employees once discriminated against. And it will run the Fly Forward program, flying those once denied the chance to board on the very flights they once dreamed of. Applause rose softly. Not loud, but unified. A single shared breath moving through the crowd. Maya stepped forward, holding the microphone. Someone asked me why it's called Dignity and Aviation. I said, because dignity is the only thing that truly helps people fly. At the back, Ryan stood quietly. No spotlight, no name called, just a peaceful smile. When Ethan saw him, he gave a slight nod. A greeting that needed no sound. A group of young trainees walked out carrying a banner. Across it were the words, "Respect flies first. Humanity lands safely." The entire plaza rose to its feet. Voices joined together, repeating the words aloud, clear, honest, full. Ethan turned to Maya. Do you see it? What began as a single moment has become a movement, not because of me, not because of you, but because we believed people can be better, Maya whispered back. And maybe this is the one flight that never needs to land. Ethan smiled gently. Dignity isn't up in the sky. It's here, in the way we look at each other. The wind passed through. The two wings, white and black, reflected sunlight, forming a silver shimmer where they met. No one spoke. They just stood there, gazing at the emblem, seeing themselves within it. A little light, a little dark, and the faith that both could still fly together. The final class of the first training program unfolded in a room filled with sunlight. Over 100 trainees, pilots, attendants, engineers, ground staff, sat in neat rows, silent and focused. No one whispered. No one checked their phone. They were listening. Ethan walked to the front. He carried no notes, only the kind of eyes that had seen more than most could imagine. His voice was calm, steady, and clear. You've learned the procedures, you've learned the standards, but there's one thing no one can teach, unless you truly want to learn it. He paused, letting the silence breathe. One day, someone will sit in the wrong seat. Someone will say the wrong word. Someone will make the wrong move. And in that moment, you'll have two choices: to do what's right by the rule, or what's right by the heart. A young trainee raised his hand. "Sir, is that what happened on Flight 3A? Ethan looked at him, eyes gentle, voice low. "No, that didn't happen on that flight. It started with that flight." He looked across the room. Many eyes met his. People think it was about a seat, but it never was. He paused again. It was never about a seat. It was about who deserves to stay seated. A faint breath rippled through the room. Some eyes glistened. Ethan smiled softly. "I was once asked to leave my seat, and I realized no one can make you move if you're sitting in truth." From the back row came the first sound of applause, then another, then more, gentle, steady, heartfelt. Ethan nodded. "Thank you, but don't clap for me. Clap for yourselves, for having the courage to listen." Maya stepped forward, her eyes bright. "You know what's beautiful? Every trainee here said they wanted to return to the sky, but they also said, this time, they want to bring something new." Ethan tilted his head. "What is it?" She smiled. "Respect." He nodded slowly. "That's enough. If every flight begins with respect, then wherever we go, humanity will always land safely." From the front row, Diana smiled. "One day, when people retell this story, they won't remember the words. They'll remember the feeling, that the world became gentler for a moment." Ethan looked around the room. Light reflected off faces once afraid to speak, now upright, open, believing. His voice softened. "Not everyone can change a system, but everyone can change a moment." He smiled faintly. "And sometimes, one moment is all it takes to change the sky." Applause rose again, longer, warmer, not the sound of celebration, but of something awakening inside. And as the sound filled the room, the closing voice echoed softly, because it was never about a seat. It was about learning to rise, without leaving anyone behind. Ethan stood by the glass window. The whole of Seattle stretched beneath the sunset. Buildings caught the soft orange light, shimmering like memories that refused to fade. A gentle wind swept through, carrying the salt of the sea and the distant horns of ships. He looked down at the city where it all began, where his dreams were doubted, then proved, quietly, through persistence. Maya approached, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You're still not taking a break?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Hard to rest when change is still in flight." She placed a cup beside him. "They say you've changed the entire aviation industry." He shook his head, eyes fixed on the horizon. "I didn't change an industry. I just reminded people humanity was never outdated." Maya was silent for a while, then asked, "Do you think this will last?" Ethan tilted his head slightly. His voice came low and steady, like the sea against stone. "Changing behavior takes weeks. Changing minds takes generations." She nodded softly. "Then we'll have to be patient." Ethan's lips curved into a small smile. Patient and honest, the two rarest things left in the world. Outside, the sky dimmed. Lights flickered on across the city, rising like stars born from the ground. Ethan whispered almost to himself, "Changing minds takes generations. But the beauty is, we've already begun." Maya leaned against the railing, watching people moving quickly down below. "Do you ever feel discouraged?" He thought for a moment. "Yes. When I see people forget faster than they learn, but then I remember something." He turned his gaze upward. Every generation has its own flight. As long as someone still wants to rise above who they were yesterday, hope will keep flying. Maya's voice softened. And if no one wants to fly anymore? Ethan smiled, his tone almost tender. Then I'll teach them how to stand tall on the ground. The pause that followed felt like peace. Only the hum of the city remained, pulsing with life. Thousands of windows glowed like eyes watching the sky. Ethan murmured, I don't need them to remember my name. I just want them to remember that dignity can become a habit. Maya looked at him and nodded. They will, because they've seen it with their own eyes. Ethan smiled again. No one truly changes the world in a single lifetime. But if we plant the right seed, someday the sky will mirror the heart of humanity. Maya gazed outward where light and shadow met, and two small birds crossed the violet horizon. She whispered, Maybe that's why people still look up when they see a plane. Ethan replied, Not to watch it fly, but to remember that something good still lives above us. He drew a slow breath, voice calm but luminous. Change doesn't need to be fast. It only needs to be real, because when something is real, it lasts longer than we do. They stood in silence. The sky reflected across the glass. And in that reflection, it looked as if they too were flying. The plane lifted into the soft light of late afternoon. Seats were close, aisles narrow, the air filled with quiet chatter and small laughter. Ethan sat between two strangers. No one looked at him for more than a few seconds. No one knew who he was. A young flight attendant smiled as she handed him a drink. Would you like some ice, sir? Ethan shook his head gently. No, thank you. His voice was calm, sincere. The man beside him struggled to fit his backpack into the overhead bin. Ethan stood to help, their hands brushing briefly. The man smiled. Appreciate it, buddy. Ethan replied softly. No problem. Every flight feels lighter when we help each other. When the plane leveled out, Ethan opened a small notebook and wrote a few lines. You don't need a bigger seat to see wide. You don't need a gold card to be greeted with a smile. A little girl in the row ahead turned around and offered him a small cookie. Want one? I've got extra. Ethan smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in months. Thank you. I'll keep it. The flight attendant passed by, noticed the scene, and smiled. She placed another cup of water on his tray. For the man who got a cookie. The route chuckled softly. Ethan looked around the cabin. No first class, no dividers, just people sharing the same air. Simple, real. He murmured to himself, This is the flight I've been waiting for. The man next to him asked, Do you fly often? Ethan nodded. Quite a bit. But today feels like the first time I'm truly flying. They both laughed quietly. No one knew that the man in seat 14B was the one who had changed an entire industry. And maybe he didn't need anyone to know. The plane crossed through golden clouds. Light brushed across his face. Peaceful, unburdened, he whispered. Some flights take you somewhere new, and some take you back to yourself. Ethan closed his eyes. No noise, no duty, no numbers, only the quiet certainty that the world, after everything, could still be kind. The smile stayed, unforced, unhidden, the smile of a man who was finally, truly flying. The boy sat by the window, golden light reflecting in his clear eyes. He tilted his head, pointing toward the side of the plane. Miss, I think there's water leaking over there. The flight attendant paused and looked. A small drop, clear as glass, rolled slowly down the edge of the panel. She leaned closer, inspecting carefully. Thank you, sweetheart. You've got sharp eyes. The boy smiled, the simple smile of someone who'd just done the right thing. His mother placed a gentle hand on his hair, proud and quiet. 2 rows behind, Ethan heard it all. He looked at the boy, warmth filling his gaze. The attendant called for maintenance. They checked the panel, wiped it clean, and confirmed it was just condensation. She turned back to the boy. All good now. But if it weren't for you, we might have missed it. The boy nodded seriously. You taught me that last time, remember? And that man too. He said if we see something wrong, we should speak up so everyone stays safe. Ethan lowered his head slightly. In the cabin window's reflection, he saw himself, years ago, sitting still, watching a red drop glisten on the floor, ignored. Now, a child had spoken the words he once swallowed. A small moment, repeating itself like an echo. Only this time, it ended with someone listening. Ethan smiled softly, almost like the wind. He whispered to himself, "We've fixed the biggest thing. Not the plane, but the people." The boy turned, catching his eyes. "Did you see the water, too, mister?" Ethan nodded. "I did. And I saw something even more important." The boy tilted his head. "What is it?" Ethan's voice warmed. "Today, you helped the whole sky remember how to listen." The boy laughed. A small bright sound, clear as the sunlight through the window. Ethan leaned back, closing his eyes. The drop was gone now. Only its faint reflection remained, where two generations looked at each other and understood. Even silence can be repaired, if someone dares to listen first. The sky drifted slowly and blue beyond the window, as if borders no longer existed. Sometimes the strongest act isn't standing up. It's staying right where you belong. Ethan glanced at the row ahead. The boy was asleep, still holding half a cookie in his hand. The young flight attendant pulled a blanket up to his shoulder, her eyes whispering thank you. No sharp voices now, only the quiet gentleness of people who had learned how to listen. He locked his phone screen. Somewhere, the world was still loud, but this cabin was calm. Dignity doesn't begin with power, it survives through kindness. The engines hummed, steady, like breathing. An old man tightened his wife's seatbelt. A young woman offered her space so a mother could rest her child's bag. Small things, yet enough to change the direction of someone's day. Ethan leaned back, eyes half closed. No one needs to swap roles anymore. When we see each other as equals, every seat is the right one. The plane tilted gently. A child woke and pointed toward a glimmer in the clouds. "Miss, there's something shiny out there." The attendant smiled. "Thank you. We'll check it right away." A few passengers nodded. Attentive kindness spread quietly, like light through glass. Ethan opened his notebook and wrote, "It wasn't about seat 3A. It's about how we treat each other. That's what keeps a plane in the air." Silence settled again. A spoon touched a tray. Soft, rhythmic. A man whispered to his son, "Today you learned something important. When you see something wrong, speak calmly." Ethan smiled. Sometimes the greatest strength is staying in your place and letting what's right speak for itself. If this story touched you, let your kindness fly farther. Share it so more people can see themselves in one another. Leave a comment, a city, a memory that made you someone who listens. If you believe in gentle justice, hit like and subscribe. Be that voice so dignity keeps flying. Outside, the sky faded, evening melting into cloud. The voice within the listener didn't stop. It only turned to silence. We just passed through a story about justice and humanity. But perhaps it was also your story. Somewhere each day, someone is still ignored. Someone stays silent just to keep their seat. And someone else just needs one person to listen, to believe the world is still kind. If today you see something wrong, pause. Look straight. Speak calmly. You don't need power or noise, only fairness in your tone. Change doesn't start from policy. It begins with how we treat one human being. When someone speaks, let them finish. When someone errs, ask why before you judge. And when you have the choice to stay silent, remember, silence can also agree with the wrong. This story may close with the words "dignity takes flight," but its journey continues. And everyone still listening right now, if you still believe kindness can fly, share this story. Comment below. I'm still listening. That's how you tell the world. Dignity never fell. And if you want more true stories of courage, fairness, and humanity, subscribe and keep traveling with us. Each week, a new journey. Each story, a reminder that we can still be better than yesterday. Because not everyone can change the whole world, but everyone can make someone's world a little warmer. just by listening. Be that voice and let human dignity keep flying.